This podcast is brought to you by patreon.com/Talking Simpsons. Head there to check out exclusive podcasts like Talking Futurama, Talk King of the Hill, the What a Cartoon Movie podcast, and tons more.
Cartoons from present and the past. Every week will be an animated bash. What a cartoon! What a cartoon! Maybe a short but mostly shows. We'll talk, we'll analyze, exploring as we go. What a cartoon! What a cartoon! What a cartoon! What a cartoon!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to What a Cartoon, the old-timey good place. I am one of your hosts, Bob One-Time Mackey, and this is an audio exploration of every cartoon ever. And who is here with me today, as always?
Hey, it's Henry Gilbert, and that's the Fairsley difference.
And this month's episode is the Mr. Show with Bob and David episode, The Story of Everest.
And unlike some places, you'll always find apples.
Yes, that's the What a Cartoon difference, folks. Welcome to April. Every April, we cover a live-action thing that's kind of like a cartoon. And this month, we are covering Mr. Show because Henry and I are big fans. And frankly, we didn't need to take notes for this. But thankfully, Bob Odenkirk's book just came out recently. And I think that was the inspiration for both of us to jump into this via the What a Cartoon treatment.
Yeah, we've, if there's one sketch show that's our favorite, it is Mr. Show for both of us. Like, it was, as they had hoped, the Monty Python of our generation, if anything was. Like, and we also did have Monty Python, but I liked this better than Monty Python.
Have never seen a TV episode of Monty Python.
Have you seen some sketches in isolation?
Yes, yeah, I've seen some of the movies, but it wasn't shown to me in my area. I saw a lot of other British things, but for some reason, Monty Python was this forbidden fruit to me. It just wasn't available.
I was very lucky that it was on my PBS station growing up, but also I had been used to seeing all the docs that take the sketches by themselves. And when you watch the full episode, it's fun in the way that you get the chaos of the whole episode, which is a big thing they brought to Mr. Show. But also, sometimes sketches suck, and I think it's good to be exposed to oh, this one actually wasn't funny. Like, here's them just screeching for 10 minutes.
They did like to do that a lot, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Show, I mean, I feel that people are looking into this more than ever because of Bob Odenkirk's rise to power throughout the past 15 years. I mean, we always knew who he was, but I think the general public didn't know who he was until Breaking Bad. And there are good reasons for that. The projects he was attached to were never popular.
No, it makes, in a way, it makes me sad that Bob Odenkirk isn't ours anymore. But he doesn't feel like a sellout to me, even though he totally could. He's been successful enough that he could, but he has stayed true to himself. Honestly, maybe it helped too that David Cross made more sellout style choices than Bob Odenkirk did in his life.
Yes, but I don't blame him for that. Somebody had to be in Scary Movie too. Hey, Chris Elliott was, right?
I heard David Cross justify his Alvin and the Chipmunks trilogy of films as his way of saying I never made any money off Mr. Show. I lost money on things like the Todd Margaret BBC series he did. He's I want to make some money. Can't I just have a house, to buy a house up in the hills? So let me do. And he's also clear of I knew it was selling out for money and I paid the price. I knew it would be hell, and it was hell. So it's I did sell a little bit of my soul for money, and I knew that.
But now you can see David Cross do stand-up in giant theaters, and the tickets cost $200, which is why I didn't buy tickets.
No,
I felt so tempted because I've never seen him do stand-up live.
Good on him making that much money. Yeah, you know what? I think I've seen him live in some I definitely saw him live when they at SF Sketchfest did a live performance of the Wet Hot American Summer, and he subbed in for David Hyde Pierce.
Okay.
Most of the original cast was there, but some people like David Hyde Pierce and Janine Garofalo weren't. And David Cross played the David Hyde Pierce character, and he was very good in it too.
It is fun to think, though, of people who fell in love with Bob Odenkirk through roles in like Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, which are both amazing shows. It's funny to think of them going back and watching Mr. Show, and actually you can find evidence of this if you look at Amazon reviews of the DVDs.
Oh, really?
I'll read one for you. 1 star. It's from the Mr. Show Seasons 1 and 2 collection. 1 star. Title, Waste of My Money. After seeing Bob Odenkirk in Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, I was curious about what else he'd done. After suffering through 1.5 episodes, I'm only curious about one thing. How did this go on for 4 seasons? Think Saturday Night Live or Second City Television, only not funny. Let's just say it was bad enough to give it a review. Frowny face.
Man, fuck that person. That's the exact reason that Bob Odenkirk did the show, was wanted to make Mr. Show to piss off idiots like this.
Piss off these squares.
Yeah.
But yes, in case you're wondering what we've covered in the past, that was live action. We have done episodes on Strangers with Candy, The Adventures of Pete and Pete, Get a Life, and Saturday Morning All-Star Hit. So this is our 5th one in a row where we're covering a live action show, and we always love to do it.
Yeah, and when I examine my fandom of Mr. Show, it is this interconnected web to many of those shows. Like, it all leads, I can follow it backwards from all the way back to Mr. Show. I go, why do I like Saturday Morning All-Star Hits? It's probably because I like Scott Gardner, and I like that because he did this thing with this person and this thing with this person, back to like College Humor that he worked on, and that was because some people I watched worked on that, and I knew that because they worked with people who worked on Mr. Show. Like, it all goes back to that.
And so this show ran from 1995 to 1998, not a long run, but it was not really readily available until 2002. So it took me forever to get around to watching this because online file sharing was not as advanced as it would later be throughout the aughts. YouTube didn't exist. And I basically had to wait for the DVDs to come out, and only hearing snippets of Mr. Show, maybe seeing an uploaded QuickTime video, hearing people quoted on internet forums, it was lost to me until 2002. But I'll talk about my history with the show after you, Henry. Like, where did you start with Mr. Show?
Well, it's funny. Yeah, I was a luckier boy than you in this regard of being exposed to Mr. Show in full, because I had a friend who his dad like worked at the cable company, so he actually had like early digital recordings tech of like, oh, record this thing. And so in 1999, when the 4th season was done, but still relatively new, he taped them digitally off of the TV. And so we all watched it together at his place. He's like, guys, it was, as the scene in Mr. Show says, check this shit out.
What's the response? No way? Or
no shit.
Oh, no shit. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
That's referencing another sketch, by the way.
But so we'd watch it together all the time, but he would skip through sketches he thought weren't good. And so it was not until the DVDs that I got to see some sketches in full ever. Like, and but then when I backtracked from it, I was like, okay, wait, but I definitely saw Bob and David and stuff beforehand, before I saw Mr. Show, that made me ready for Mr. Show. And I definitely saw the 1998 comic relief nude improv sketch, which was very memorable. And then I was like, oh, wait. And I also watched the Ben Stiller Show when it replayed on Comedy Central in 1995. And my favorite sketch in it is essentially a Mr. Show sketch, TJO Pooter Toots.
Right. Written by David Cross.
And then on top of that, I also knew them from their appearances on News Radio and Just Shoot Me. So, yeah, I was very ready for Mr. Show once I finally saw it. And afterwards, I was like, oh, I recognize all these people in everything. Like, just seeing Brian Posehn in something made me go like, oh, well, this means it must be cool because these are Mr. Show and Transitive Property.
Nobody else looks or sounds like Brian Posehn. I had the same experience in which it took me forever. I mean, you saw Mr. Show before I did, but you still saw it when the series was over. But you would see these folks like Bob and David and Brian Posehn and other folks show up in like sitcoms from time to time, like their funny friends who got sitcoms or working them in as bit characters. And then it all came together once I watched Mr. Show. Like, oh, I've David Cross is also unmistakable. He looks and sounds so unique. And Bob Odenkirk, I know I had seen him maybe even on Conan once or twice.
Yeah, or like when you rewatch some SNLs, you're like, wait, hey, there's Bob Odenkirk right there. Like, same with you'd recognize Conan. Yeah, they did appearances on Conan all the time too. I retroactively realized their episode of News Radio is, well, they were in more than one, but the one I remember is Bob Odenkirk, David Cross, and Brian Posehn play Dave Foley's college friends who were all in a a cappella group together called Chock Full of Notes.
Okay, wow.
And their agreement was that if 15 years after or 10 years after college they weren't successful and married, that they would reform the group. But nobody else wanted to do it. They all felt like they had to. And they just have this funny line of Dave Foley refuses to do it, but the other three guys leave, and Bob Odenkirk says, "Last chance for Chalk." I love that, last chance for Chalk. And David Cross, I think he hated doing Just Shoot Me because his character said chicken pot pie.
Is it because he was pretending to be intellectually disabled? The character was?
Yes, yeah. And then he gets found out, and he said, I remember one interview when Just Shoot Me was relatively recent. He's like, I have to hear that chicken pot pie thing every time I walk through an airport.
I bet it's faded by now, right? Maybe they're yelling like Alvin and the Chipmunks references at him.
Now he's meeting 22-year-olds who were like 8 when they saw Alvin and the Chipmunks. Like, I'm thinking of that too because recent guest on Talking Simpsons, Tunerific Tariq, just did a video on the live action trilogy, actually 4 films. And I'm thinking like, that's how his generation first got to know David Cross, as the evil music manager from those films.
He's the villain. Yeah. So I started buying the DVDs when they were coming out. They started coming out in like summer of 2002. And I would just show them to everybody. I don't think I was cool or anything. I was just more of a comedy nerd, and nobody I showed these to had ever heard about Mr. Show, but they would recognize, Bob and David, usually, mostly David, I think. And if you dated me or I tried to date you throughout the aughts, I definitely sat you down and made you watch the Mr. Show just to see if you were cool. So, these DVDs got a lot of play. When we were passing around the wacky tobacco a few times, in the college days.
Yeah, I mean it's a stoner friendly show, especially the Altered State of Drugsachusets. Probably enjoyed that with actually I never went through that until the pandemic with my husband. Then I finally was like, all right, let's do this. I am going to be the guy who forces you to watch Mr. Show.
Somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to be that partner. But yeah, I chose this episode, The Story of Everest, because it's the one I would show people first, because I think it is the strongest one. Although I think almost every Mr. Show episode is very uneven. There's always like one bad sketch in there, but that's true of like almost every sketch show. So there's no like perfect episode, but this one has some of the stronger moments in Mr. Show, especially the last sketch. And even Bob, in his recent book, and we'll talk more about that very soon, he identifies The Story of Everest, I think, as one of the strongest episodes, and the sketch The Story of Everest as one of his favorite sketches, if not the favorite.
Yeah, even on his very recent, at the time of this recording, Hot Ones interview he did, where it's the YouTube video where you eat hot chicken wings and answer questions. Story of Everest was like the first sketch he talked about when asked to name favorite sketches. Yeah, if I were to name my favorite sketch, 2 of them are in this episode and they'd be close, but I think I do just love the chaos, the tempered chaos of pre-taped call-in show. That is my favorite.
That's one of the best. Yeah. I do like this one, though, because it's really an ensemble piece. Pre-taped call-in show is David Cross melting down.
Yes.
And that is great. And I love Audition, too, because it is just David Cross freaking out. But I also like sketches that bring everybody in.
That's true, yeah. And it's good to do one that we'll have to talk about who the star of it is, but Story of Everest is them showing off that, like, Bob or David don't have to be the main character of every sketch. They actually can make space for somebody else to be the lead of a sketch. That person they make space for, of course, is a white man. But hey, they're not soaking up all the spotlight.
Yeah, they give it to other white people.
And also I wanted to say, too, I'd say to this day, my love of Mr. Show informs so much of my comedy taste, because I followed it to Arrested Development. I probably would have watched Arrested Development at any time eventually, but I was there on day one because David Cross was a regular on the show. And then in 2006, I was looking this up. In 2006, early podcast days, I Love Movies was the name of it. It's now Doug Loves Movies,
right?
The Doug Benson one. Bob, David, Paul F. Tompkins, and a young man named Scott Aukerman did it. And I started listening to that podcast because I thought I'd hear Mr. Show guys. And then Scott Aukerman starts his own podcast, And hey, the rest is podcast history.
And I'm sorry, did you mention that it was also Doug Benson's article on their website?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
They used to have a really good website, with bobanddavid.com or something like that, where it's like I always went to it in college to just figure out, like, okay, what are they working on now? What new article about Jim Belushi did David Cross write?
So there, thank you, Bob. That actually unlocked even more for me. That's why I went to the I Love Movies podcast, because I was visiting the withbobanddavid.com all the time. I think that was the name of it, right?
Or just bobanddavid.com.
Yeah, I think that's right, yeah.
And I should say that for 15 years, I regularly wrote comedy online, and Mr. Show was probably my biggest inspiration. And I don't think I really ever ripped them off, but things like Mr. Show and Tim and Eric, like things from the late 90s, early aughts were really inspiring to me, which is why a lot of my comedy has not aged well. But one of these days, I will put together a book and change some words around and then sell it to all of you out there.
And Tim and Eric, we wouldn't have that without Mr. Show. Like and very directly Bob Odenkirk, but really the entire Mr. Show universe. And like modern podcasting is built by, at least in America, many Mr. Show alumni, especially Scott Aukerman, but also like when I think of the comedy podcast guest and who is the number one comedy podcast guest, I do think it's Paul F. Tompkins, and he got famous off Mr. Show too.
But now when I see him in this, I think he's dressed without flair.
He is. You're right. He's like 80 pounds heavier and dressed like a regular guy.
Yeah.
He's not the wonderful clothes horse we all know PFT.
He's the one guy I'll allow to dress like that. That's all. I only let one of them in my life, and it's Paul F. Tompkins.
He's earned that right.
Yeah. Let's talk about Mr. Show history. So for research on this episode, I checked out the Bob Odenkirk autobiography, Comedy, Drama. And like Henry, I highly recommend the audiobook version. I was able to get it from my library. So check out your library and their digital loans, because they might have a copy of this. I don't normally like audiobooks, especially fiction, because I kind of like zone out. But you want Bob Odenkirk to be reading this to you, because he is as funny as he is here as he is on Mr. Show. And I was laughing out loud several times just from his reading of his own material.
The way, if he writes in the book a story about meeting somebody, if you listen to the audiobook, you get to hear his impression of that person, which makes it 10 times funnier.
And I also checked out, because I've had it for 20 years, it's the long out of print Mr. Show episode guide called Mr. Show, What Happened? And I will say it's not that essential, so don't feel bad if you never got your hands on this. The first third of the book is a bio of where Mr. Show came from, and also bios of all the performers. But the rest of the book is an episode guide. And honestly, by 2002, we didn't really need printed episode guides for TV shows.
It was just a nice thing to have.
Yeah.
I think the Odenkirk family was probably in the idea of books, though. It's the prestige of a book. You're not just going to put this online. I mean, meanwhile, I think it was around the same time Mystery Science Theater did not print an updated Colossal episode guide. They just put them online.
They put them on the Sci-Fi Channel site, and I think they just got moved over to MST3K Info.
Totally.
But yeah, so a lot of the stories in that Mr. Show What Happened book are actually on the commentary, because they were recording the commentaries in the early aughts when that book was being written. And honestly, it was so shortly after the show had finished. If you listen to the first audio commentaries, Mr. Show is 5 years in their rearview mirror.
It's crazy. Yeah, listening to those commentaries now, it still is a mindfuck to me, because I think of that as after the show. So it's always after the show. So I don't think of the commentaries as aging, even though everybody in the commentaries is only 5 years older than they were when they started the show. And now it's 15 years plus since those commentaries were recorded.
Henry, it's 20 years plus.
Oh, no.
Yes.
Oh,
2002 is when the first DVD set came out.
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
Well, all right then.
Time is passing, my friend.
No fair.
Yeah.
No fair.
But yes, you can see all of Mr. Show on HBO Max. It's one of the old HBO shows they actually still have online, along with Larry Sanders. But no Dream On, no Tales from the Crypt. What am I doing here? What am I paying for?
In all its SD glory as well. Yeah. I remember a time just 5-6 years ago, how big a deal it was where all the HBO shows it got put on Prime for Prime members on Prime Video for Amazon. And then I now see that as Warner testing the waters. Okay, how much would people actually watch this if it's on Prime? And I remember celebrating, like, guys, you can stream Mr. Show now. Oh, my God.
It was locked behind the DVD vault for a while. Yeah, and these DVDs are still in print. I really recommend them. There's a commentary for each one. They're all very funny and informative. At least once per episode, you can hear Bob saying, "This sketch sucks," and then detailing the ways he would fix it.
That is something even in all his success, I think that's why I still have all this affection for Bob Odenkirk, because he is still a grouch. Like, there's part of him that's just like kind of a not nice grouch about his own stuff, and that's completely in the book. Even in that Hot Ones I watched, he was mostly like a regular, like, oh, and I like talking about comedy, and also the interviewers from Chicago, so they could have some Chicago bro talk. But then at the end of it, he goes like, this wasn't as bad as I thought it'd be. Like, that was his big compliment at the end of it.
He's always trying to like fix things, and he's admitted he can often be rude about it. He's always been trying to work on that his entire life.
He always is like, no, this would be funnier if you did this. Like, yeah, there are some stories in that book that I was like, wow, this is some candor that you normally do not get in memoirs.
I mean, it is skipping ahead, but there's a great anecdote in the book where Bob Odenkirk is talking about working with Martin Freeman on Fargo, and he barely met the guy, and he's like in a room with him saying, let's work on our characters. And Martin Freeman says, don't tell me how to fucking act.
Wow.
And they were fine after that, but he was just like, Bob was approaching this like, I'm gonna help you work through this with me, and Martin's like, I'm a fucking British actor. Get out of my face. I know what I'm doing.
We all know what we're doing. We hate hearing Americans tell us how to act. That's funny. Well, we've been seeing that a lot in the news lately, that I feel like every week there's a new quote of Brian Cox saying, like, I hate American actors with their method cry bullshit.
Yeah. I think, like, there's some old Michael Caine quote from, I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm very much paraphrasing this. But there was, like, some young actor asking, like, what he did to get into character. He's like, it's called acting. And that's basically all he said. It's like, you play pretend. That's it.
And you drink a whole lot. Yes.
So we can start off with one question. What is Mr. Show with Bob and David? Well, my answer for you is that it's an incredibly unpopular but also incredibly influential sketch comedy show that ran on HBO from 95 to 98. It's essentially the example of what 90s alternative comedy was. And I'm putting that in big quotes because it's such a fuzzy, nebulous term. But if you want to know what alternative comedy was, look at Mr. Show and look at how everything afterwards was just having fun with those same ideas.
It set the tone for American comedy for years and years to come. The effect are still being felt. And I mean, to quote, I think it's Jay Leno, if we're saying like half-remembered quotes here, I believe it's Jay Leno who said like alternative comedy, more like an alternative to comedy.
Ooh, zing.
But yeah, I mean, it was so cool. It was the cool comedy. Like we also are, I think, both of us Mr. Show fans, in that we look up to it like older brother kind of thing, or just like the slightly older cool kid that we're like, man, they're so cool. I want to be as funny as them.
Yeah, and by slightly older, all of these men are at least 20 years older than us.
Yeah, actually, they
it's
were
like the cool uncle comedy, I guess.
Yeah, actually, it's more like that, because when it debuted, like, Bob was Odenkirk was like early 30s, and we were 13. So,
yes,
yeah.
So it's like the cool younger uncle. So the story of Mr. Show is the story of Bob and David. So let's start with a bio on both of these guys. And I will say my Bob bio is a lot more comprehensive because he just wrote an autobiography. And David Cross wrote a book like a decade ago, which is just a collection of essays. And honestly, it's not that great. I want to see the David Cross autobiography.
That's, it's always, Bob even says it in the book. David will deny your premise instantly. And one of those things is like, well, the obvious thing is to do a memoir. And he's like, no, I'm not going to. Like that. And in that book, I listened to that audiobook a bunch back in the day. I still remember his funny way he says erotic AIDS patient as a funny Halloween costume.
In the David Cross book?
In the David Cross book, yeah. He has a list of he talks about how much he hates Halloween, and he's like, but here's funny costumes you can do, and one of them is erotic AIDS patient. But,
well, it was 2010.
But yeah, in the book, he denies telling you stories about his life many times. He's like, well, I could tell you about how shitty my dad was, but I'll just move on. Like,
and Bob kind of skirts over that too.
They have a similar childhood with a bad dad.
Well, they just know that story is very boring. It's why I don't talk about my bad dad. Just like, yeah, boo-hoo, wah, wah. We've been there. We've heard that. Bob Odenkirk, he was born October 22nd, 1962. He grew up in Naperville, Illinois, with 6 siblings. Yes, it was an Irish Catholic family, part German as well. Bob took quickly to comedy. He cites Monty Python as his biggest inspiration in his early life. But he also cites lesser-known things that are harder to find today, like Bob and Ray, The Credibility Gap, and the Dudley Moore and Peter Cook comedy act, Derek and Clive. I'm sure if you go on YouTube, somebody has uploaded these, either that or Internet Archive. I'm vaguely familiar with these. Of course, Credibility Gap is where, like, I think Harry Shearer and Michael McKean, they were in that.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, you know, there's that's something I really loved learning from Odenkirk's book that I could have always assumed about him, but he was a huge comedy nerd in that age, like in that he came to comedy and wanted to attack it as like a mega nerd of these things, like and that background really sounds a lot like Dave Merkin as well, another American who loves British comedy.
Yeah, and a guy that Bob worked directly for.
He didn't have the one thing he said about him was just that, like, oh, and he had a very expensive car. Like that was when there were no compliments. I was like, well, I guess he didn't like working with Merkin.
I think he was omitting the truth there about Merkin. But yeah, there's a nice dig from him in his book about Mad Magazine, in that he would read it not to find it funny, but to understand how jokes were constructed, which is a fun dig on Mad Magazine. So Bob Odenkirk, he graduates from high school early at the age of 16. He didn't think a career in comedy was even possible for him because of where he grew up. It's sort of like where we grew up. Also, nobody knew what a podcaster was in the year 2000 or 2001. And just like, well, I guess maybe a factory I'll work at, or what's a dentist do again? How do you get to do that? But he just went to college. After a few colleges in Illinois, he was able to make his way onto their dedicated radio station. So he found, even though these opportunities were not as available to him in, the greater Chicago area, he was finding places to write and perform comedy in very limited venues.
And I also liked hearing how, for him, comedy was like a real place for venting anger, like just how he has all this anger he wants to spew out, but you have to find the cleverest way to do it and shape it the right way.
He even had a regular midnight to 4 a.m. show on the radio. And in his book, he says, nobody listened to it, but it was a great way to experiment with comedy, to learn comedy. And he regrets that the people who do that today, everything will just remain online forever. All of your comedic experiments are just like frozen forever, and everyone can see them.
Yeah, it's very true. You have to grow up online as a content creator now. You don't get any anonymity anymore.
And he is one of those guys where he has strong beliefs in like comedic principles, but he also thinks like you just need to get out there and do it. I think he absolutely rejects like the improv classes and things like that. He is totally against all of that stuff.
Oh man, no, that's one of the funniest bits in that first part of his book, because the way he first writes about Del Close in it, I was like, I know who the Del Close fanboys are. It's the core of the UCB4 and all of those guys. Those are his acolytes. And so I thought, I didn't know that he was one of those guys. And then almost immediately after that, he's like, all those Del Close people, they're all just sucking themselves off on their improv rules. I think it's stupid.
Yeah, I guess you can buy the book on how to be funny, the official like UCB book, but UCB has not been in good shape for a while now.
What did all those rules get them? Like a bunch of closed down theaters, and I lost a lot of respect for the UCB4, at least as far as building something. Like I think they're all still funny, and I have happy memories about their TV show too. But yeah, all the shit that happened afterwards, like they completely lost their company, and they screwed over a lot of good people.
Well, I also heard numerous podcasters complain about how much money they wasted on like rising through the improv levels at UCB.
Yeah, there's a reason people compare it to Scientology a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yes, he's getting radio shows at college. A few credits shy of graduating, Bob moves to Chicago, where all your Hollywood dreams come true. Chicago is and was famous for its Second City improvisational enterprise. And while he's in Chicago, like looking around trying to find comedy, he does get his credits. Don't worry, Bob has a bachelor's degree. We can breathe a sigh of relief.
Good.
He's a college-educated comedian. So, like you said, Henry, he does run into Del Close. Del Close is like the improv guru of the Upright Citizens Brigade. And at that point, I guess he was just at Second City, correct?
Yes, yeah. He's in and out of like the SNL sphere. Like he knew so many of the SNL guys, but he definitely is like a cult. I think Odenkirk is very right that he is a cult-like figure. Like he wanted to be the Svengali over all of this thing. And certainly that would mean he couldn't work with a guy like Lorne Michaels, who he's like, no, I'm in charge of this cult, not you. And I think the people who love him, again, who are great improvisers like Matt Walsh and of the rest of UCB, they are guys captured by the cult. Like they're
Absolutely,
like, well, yeah, that's how I was trained, and it's the right way to do it.
And to be fair, they are very funny, and I think their sketch show is as funny as this one.
Yeah, I would totally agree. Yeah, and as far as like being a cohesive episode of a show, I think they are better at doing a cohesive sketch show, like as a full story. I think the highs.
It's called The Herald, Henry.
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, I do hate all those rules. I would say the highs of Mr. Show are higher than the highs of UCB, but the overall average of quality, I'd maybe say UCB is a little higher.
I think so. I still think they got a lot more money to make their show.
Oh, there's also that. Yeah.
So, yes, weirdly enough, Bob runs into Del Close in a bookstore and goes back to his weird house, and they have a meeting together, and this would determine the rest of Bob's life. Like, Bob is just like, how do I do this? How does it work? You know, I don't think he ever really studies directly under Del Close, but Del Close sets him off on his journey. And this is when Bob starts performing improv in Chicago and stand-up as well. And this is where he meets people that we know, like Chris Farley, Tim Meadows, and Robert Smigel. And Smigel is the one who eventually gets him on SNL as a writer.
It sounds like Robert Smigel is his good friend who also sometimes regrets, like Bob Odenkirk makes him regret being friends with him a couple times. Odenkirk is very upfront of hating a famous sketch Smigel wrote, and he's still very, even in the book, still is like, no, that sketch sucks. The Chris Farley Chippendale sketch, he hates it.
Anytime Bob's interviewed about Farley, that sketch comes up, and he does hate it.
But I love that chapter about him interviewing Del Close, also because I can project myself onto it, like he is a comedy nerd interviewing a comedy hero. And how many times have we, felt that ourselves on a podcast?
Oh, yeah. We try not to turn it into the Chris Farley show. But yeah, I would feel that way interviewing Bob Odenkirk. But Bob probably would not offer me drugs like Del Close offered to Bob back in the 80s.
I'd hope not.
So yeah, Smigel arrived there first. I'm leaving out a lot of details, but Smigel was in this improv review called All You Can Eat. And that's where Bob eventually got a place in. And that's Smigel went to SNL first. Then Bob followed after that. So Bob gets there in 87. And like many writers we love, he hates it there. He thinks it sucks. He thinks the way they do everything there sucks. And he like totally is against the like, we might not be ready to put the sketch on the air, but it needs to go on the air. And his response is like, why not spend more time on these sketches?
I know it's like, well, it's got to be done now. Like, no, it doesn't. Like, you just,
I really feel like young creators, and I'm sure I felt this way at some point, but it's something I would try to break young creators out of, is I think it's like a fraudulent populist idea, like South Park. Oh, South Park makes their episodes in 3 days and they're funnier than ever. And then SNL, they have to make everything in 1 week and they write everything on a Tuesday and they stay up all night. And that's why it's so funny. It's like, no, you can spend time on something. You can be professional and still come out with a quality product that's sincere and speaks to your abilities.
But when it comes down from the top of like, well, that's how Lorne Michaels always did it. And this was in Harry Shearer's WTF when he talked about his bad time in SNL, is like, you can't change that system, because to change that system is to change Lorne Michaels or to challenge his control of the thing. And also, if you challenge Lorne about it and you say, like, well, actually it worked better on this other show, he'll just say, like, not really a fit here. Yeah.
There's a funny, like, everyone is always trying to please Lorne Michaels. And I remember Bob Odenkirk was complaining about the master thespian character. It's just like, what are we sending up? This is the late 80s. Why are we making fun of this kind of a character? But he wrote what he thought was a good sketch, and it's the master thespian in like a bathroom doing something. Like the sketch is in a bathroom. And I think he just is like asking Lorne, what do you think? And Lorne's like, there's no fucking echo. because he was just mad that it's like, if he's in the bathroom, there should be an echo. There's no fucking echo.
Jeez.
And he said when it aired, the non-dress rehearsal version, when it aired, there was an echo and it was very distracting. So he's like caught up in all of these weird things that aren't relevant to comedy.
That's I when I realized that people who worked on SNL hated SNL was around when those Mr. Show DVDs came out. It was more the Live from New York book that was the oral history thing that was full of like negativity on the production. But then to hear Bob on the commentary still go like, oh boy, these our sets don't look as expensive at SNL. Probably why our sketches aren't any good, right? Oh, it needs to be a $12,000 set to be a good sketch.
And every sketch should be a game show or a talk show.
It's like, why spend that much money on a I still think of that whenever I see how every fucking sketch on SNL, even the good ones, are usually a talk show. It's like, well, it's this character's talk show, and then a wacky person shows up.
I think Bob's theory for good sketch comedy is the walls should shake, like because the walls shook on Python when the characters would walk around.
Exactly,
it was cheaply built. So yeah, I neglected to say that like Smigel went out to SNL, Bob stayed in Chicago doing improv and doing a waiter job, and as he is doing his waiter job, Dennis Miller is reading his first joke he submitted to SNL about Bob Hope, and so he didn't know if he could tell anyone like that's my joke up there because they think he would be crazy. But that's the story of his rise to fame. So yeah, Bob is working on SNL, but during the summer hiatus, he's going back to Chicago to do improv. And this is when he performs in Happy Happy Good Show, one of these legendary comedy things you can't see anything from because it was just on stage, with Conan O'Brien and other performers like Jill Talley later on Mr. Show. And out of this Happy Happy Good Show review came famous SNL sketches that would air later, like the Nude Beach sketch, a very famous sketch from that era, and also the Chicago Superfans. And the In the Year 2000 bit from Conan O'Brien show would come from Happy Happy Good Show.
Oh man, that's like the Sex Pistols' first album or one of their only concerts kind of stories. That's amazing. I've always wished I could have seen that.
All of these things, I'm like, if I had a time machine, I wouldn't go back in time to kill Hitler or stop 9/11 because those would not be feasible goals for me. No one would believe me, but I could easily get into Happy Happy Good Show or watch like the early stage versions of Mr. Show in like 1994 in Santa Monica. I would want to do all of these things.
That's how nerdy we are.
Yeah.
That's what we'd want a time machine for.
No one's going to listen to me when I'm like, that building's going to fall tomorrow. Yeah, right, buddy.
I mean, before I get in a time machine, though, I'm memorizing at least the next who won those World Series for the 5 years I'm there, and then I'm set for life. Yeah.
So while he's very unhappy at SNL, every summer he is returning to Chicago to do improv. One of these summers saw him performing with Chris Farley, who he was working with in Chicago, and that's where the two came up with Matt Foley, the Matt Foley character. It was based on an existing character Chris Farley had of an angry coach, like yelling, like barking at his students.
Yeah, sure.
Students, sportsmen, athletes,
guys.
Whatever. And that meshed with like a backstory that Bob wrote. Like he was adding more specificity to the character. And when Farley got to SNL, that's when they just did that sketch verbatim and it killed.
Matt Foley is essentially like angry Bob Odenkirk as played by Chris Farley.
Yes.
Like it is a perfect melding of their characters, and it is that was actually in that recent Hot Ones too, where somebody asked him about Chris Farley, and he's like, "Oh yeah." People would say when he first was getting started, like, I think this guy's got something. He's like, oh, yeah? Oh, you really think? Yeah. This guy has undeniable, like, incredible charisma. Obviously, he's going to be huge.
But once you worked with him enough, you realize, like, he's going to be dead.
Yes.
It was inevitable for everybody, and he really underlines that in his book.
No, I love's a weird, but it is poignant how in the book he points out that, like, every time late in life when he'd meet Chris Farley, there would be giant neon signs like warning you, like, this is gonna, like, he's danger. And he's like, well, what am I gonna do? Tell him to stop? He'll listen this one time. If I asked him to stop one extra time, oh, he'd definitely listen to me then. Like, no, he was on a self-destructive path. That's what he wanted.
He burns so bright, like Chris Farley. So while at SNL, Bob also crosses paths with a young Ben Stiller, who doesn't last very long on the show. This will become relevant later. But after 3 years, Bob says adieu to SNL. He moves to Hollywood, looking for writing work that can also sustain his performing career. And a fun fact that comes from that book is he could have just walked onto The Simpsons. He could have easily gotten a writing job, and it was a possibility, but he said no because he thinks animation is so time-consuming. They're going to need me for so many rewrites. I need a sitcom job where I can also perform at night when this day job is over.
It was a smart move to know that that was an option for him, that he could have been, and a very rich person. Like he was pals with George Meyer. George Meyer, you can see him in the audience in one of the early episodes of Mr. Show.
That's right, yeah.
So he could have done it, but you're right. He I'm sure was probably warned off of like, these are 12-hour days on The Simpsons, and there's never a summer.
Especially those early seasons. But yes, Bob Odenkirk incredibly lucky because at the time his favorite show was Get a Life, previous episode of What a Cartoon. And his agent calls him and says, how about a job on Get a Life? He's like, well, that's my favorite show. Sure. So how lucky is Bob Odenkirk? He arrives in Hollywood, almost instantly gets a job on his favorite show.
It's such a funny story. Yeah. And he was just one of many great writers hired onto season 2 of that show as well.
Yeah. Like Charlie Kaufman is on there as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And though behind the scenes, it is entirely imploding both on a network level and also between Chris Elliott and David Merkin.
Yeah.
It's all falling apart.
Bob says he doesn't like the second season that much. He prefers the first season. I'm the other way around. I like how messy and mean the second season is, and I like how it gets away from any sitcom roots. But I think Bob likes the sitcom subversion more than I do.
Yeah, I think I can see. Well, also, I think Bob probably likes the thing he worked on less than the thing he didn't work on.
That's
too.
Also very true. Yeah.
Both seasons are great, but I do really love just how incredibly cruel the second season is. Like, it makes the first season seem nice by comparison, and I mean, it is the Dave Merkin fully taking over. He's like, no, he dies at the end of every episode now.
It was innovative.
Yeah.
So he's on Get a Life, Bob Odenkirk. It's canned by Fox in mid-92. And by that point, Bob has a pretty close comedy crew that he met just hanging out in LA and performing. People like Ben Stiller, Janine Garofalo, the always funny Andy Dick, and a little guy named David Cross. And together, this crew and some other talented folks put together the Ben Stiller Show, which is a little 13-episode sketch show that barely ran on Fox, but still won an Emmy. And I think the last episode didn't even air on Fox. It aired on Comedy Central much later.
Yeah, I remember. That's when I watched it. I didn't watch it on Fox. I watched the 95 Comedy Central replays that were always advertised with like 1, it won an Emmy, and 2, we have the lost episode. And yeah, when you watch it after seeing Mr. Show, it feels kind of limited because it can't be Mr. Show yet. But it beforehand, it was really big and different. Like the crappiest stuff, or the stuff that ages the worst in it to me, other than of course Andy Dick related things, is when on Mr. Show, if they had done a parody of something, they'd make up a guy and they'd be, oh, this is a parody of this type of guy. Well, meanwhile on Ben Stiller's show, they're like, well, this is Eddie Munster and this is Manson or whatever.
It was almost like basically them doing sketches from The Critic. A lot of it was very tied into immediate pop culture things.
Yeah. Oh, and I guess Apatow wrote on it, and he came straight from The Critic. So.
Oh, he was about to go to The Critic. This is before The Critic.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I'm getting that timeline mixed up.
This is 92.
You're right, right.
So yes, and Cross would start writing for the series late in its run. We'll talk about Cross soon. We're wrapping up Bob Odenkirk, though. So as a side note, after this and before Mr. Show, Bob does write for Conan O'Brien's first season with Robert Smigel and a few other folks he was close with, but I don't think that's mentioned in his book at all.
No, I really don't think he touches on it, which is funny. I would think him and Conan are probably still buds, but I don't get it. Like
it might be one of those things where it's like I can't include everything because he was doing a lot around this time.
It's funny too on the Conan O'Brien like archive of stuff they put out. They've put out so many things recently because again, Bob Odenkirk's bigger than ever, and they put out like so many of the times he appeared on there that he like literally like wrote sketches. Like he's like, hey, you know what? If I'm going to come on, I'm going to write a sketch for me to just perform on the show.
Yeah, and I will say it was nice to be there for Conan's first season. I feel like what people said about Letterman in the 80s, like, oh, you had to be there. It was just a crazy show. It was breaking all the rules of talk shows. That got reined in after maybe like the 90s. But there was still like, you didn't know what you were going to see. There would be fake guests on the show.
Yeah, it was such a special show. It really did feel like how we'd hear from older people what Letterman was to them. That's what it felt like to us, like a dangerous but in weird way, like not as mean spirited as Letterman, more goofy and silly.
Conan is always eager to please. Letterman wants to annoy and alienate you.
He's a grumpy jerk. Meanwhile Conan is like, no, I'm the star of the show. Hey,
he needs a friend. He invented podcasts. Everyone,
he did.
He was the first one.
We thank him every day for it. Thank you, Conan.
So by the way, I'm only tracing the history of Bob and David up to Mr. Show because obviously Mr. Show ended 25 years ago. There's a lot to cover there, so we're just tracing their history up to Mr. Show. So now we've gotten to the point in which Bob and David have finally joined forces. Let's talk about David Cross now. So again, this is not going to be as extensive a bio because David Cross, he needs to get around to writing that autobiography. He's almost 60, you know. He's just had a kid recently. It's time to sit down and let us know about your life, dude.
He's
been
an
too
old
long.
dad.
Yeah.
He waited a while, but that kid's going to live in the lap of luxury.
Yeah, all that chipmunk money. I think his new tour is called the World's Worst Daddy Tour or something like that.
Every fucking stand-up when they have a kid.
Patton Oswalt did it. David Cross did it 10 years later.
Yeah, John Mulaney's doing it right now, too. They all like, oh, I had a kid, time to tell the dad. Which, I get it. Becoming a parent is a major life event, and if you're a comedian, you will of course think of things to say.
I think they're having kids to get new material. That's what I think.
I think, hey, you stop being a regular guy, so what is your stand-up going to be about? Like, this was Ellen DeGeneres' problem. All her stand-up could just be about being rich, because she never had kids.
Yeah. I guess all of her stand-up before was about, like, I was at the grocery store the other day, and blah, blah. You don't go to the grocery store anymore.
You haven't driven your own car in like, what was... There was a scene. There's a clip of her and Oprah talking about, like, when was the last time you went to a bank? Like, I can't remember.
These rich people.
Yeah.
So born April 4th, 1964 in Roswell, Georgia, though he didn't stay there long. David Cross did not have the best childhood. His family was constantly on the move. His dad basically abandoned the family at age 10, at which point his mom said, "You're the man of the house now." And he essentially had to fill that role because he was like he was the eldest child, basically.
Yeah, it sounded like a real rough life for him. I remember on his WTF, he tells this very sad story of, like, for his bar mitzvah, his dad came back into his life and said, like, the family's coming back together again, and I just need a little, you got all this money, I just need a little of it to get things started, and then again we're gonna move back in. And his dad just, like, stole his money. Like, he literally like robbed his child and conned him. It's a pretty horrible dude.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the worst Bob said about his dad was, like, alcoholic, never around, kind of verbally abusive, but he was still there.
It sounded like for Odenkirk too that his dad, died, had the decency to die early in his life.
Yeah, like in the 80s, I believe his dad died. And yeah, in Bob's book, he posits David was such a wild guy in the 80s and 90s because he had to be an adult at age 10 to help, like, put together the family and help his mom, like, figure things out. So David, Bob does not like doing stand-up. He tried. Bob Odenkirk is like, I don't like telling the same jokes over and over. He's more of a guy who likes doing sketch. David likes doing stand-up. He started doing it at age 17. Immediately, he moves to New York with no plans, and then he moves to Boston to attend Emerson College, which he drops out of after one semester.
He's a stand-up who got does sketch, and Bob is a sketch guy who does stand up sometimes. Like, that's a really fun combo of dudes.
And David's stand up was challenging the traditional stand up of the era that was very cheesy, very it was like the Jay Leno, Jerry Seinfeld blazer and white sneakers stand up.
I loved his negativity, and just that he was, like, calling bullshit on things, especially like his again, this is before being an atheist was annoying and when it was cool. I loved hearing him tell jokes about that too.
So he's doing stand-up shows in Boston. This is where he met and befriended a young man named John Ennis, who is on Mr. Show in the future, even on the reboot. They go to LA a few times. This results in no employment. and they returned back east to start this group called Cross Comedy. It's like a 12-person comedy group. David Cross is in it. He's the star of the show. It's Cross Comedy. This is impossible to Google because just typing in Cross Comedy gets you like everything David Cross has been in comedy-wise. You can find some pictures of that time, but it's very hard to find out like what they did.
I wish I could have found some because it's like it's him and a young H. John Benjamin.
Yeah, he's in it.
Yeah, who is I love H. John. I mean, now he is a very famous cartoon voice actor, but he also just felt like, no, he's my guy. He's only I know Ben Katz from Dr. Katz.
It was distracting when I was watching home movies. I'm like, well, no, that's Ben, and he's so sweet. Why is he angry in this?
Right, yeah. And now Coach McGurk has been left completely behind by Bob Belcher.
And Archer.
And, oh, God, right, Archer.
David's stand-up at this time was even more controversial and aggressive than it was in the like aughts, because he would often be like characters on stage, and the audience wouldn't know he was playing a character. In his book, Bob talks about one of David's stand-up characters was a very positive guy with a laryngectomy. So he'd come on stage holding like some like bar tool, not really like one of those voice boxes, but he'd press it up to his throat. It's like, how you doing today? And like he'd be in a really great mood, and he would just like freak people out. Often he would have like plants in the audience to yell at him. He was all about shaking things up.
That's right.
In the world of stand-up.
It's the transgressiveness was part of the fun. It really was.
And yeah, this is a very brief bio on where he was before Mr. Show, because until the Ben Stiller Show, David is not in show business. He is doing stand-up in Boston. He's there for 9 years. He's suffering for his art. He's doing a lot of substances, having like no money to show for it. And he was kind of happy being like a big fish in a small comedy pond because he was a comedy hipster. He was an iconoclast. He was one of those guys. But then when former Boston pal Janine Garofalo calls him up and is like, hey, we've got a writing spot in the Ben Stiller Show. Do you want to do this? He said, I was so tired of being poor. And he drove across the country in 3 days to join the Ben Stiller Show as it was being canceled. And yes, PGO Pooter Toots, that was his sketch. And he even acts in the sketch.
Right, yeah. It's fun. It's the most hair I ever saw him on television with.
It's one of those things where like you see early Seinfelds and Jason Alexander has like a little bit more hair, and you're like, that's distracting. Just get rid of that little you're hanging on to dear life there, buddy.
Or like season 1 Sopranos, and you see the hairline of Tony Soprano, and you're like, oh, Gandolfini's just holding on there. It's That's to know that Dave Cross iconoclast is a perfect way to put it. Like when I watched David Cross's speech for Bob Odenkirk's Hollywood Walk of Fame, he crapped all over it because he's thought like, this is stupid. Getting a star on the Walk of Fame is dumb. Bob shouldn't even have wanted this. And then when he finishes his, honestly disrespectful speech, then Bob just laughs and hugs him. He's like, I made you come. I made you have to do this. Ha ha.
I mean, in a way, David Cross is like the most Gen X guy in the universe, for good and for ill. Like, he has all of the comedic chops that we associate with some of our Gen X heroes, but also the unnecessary aggression sometimes.
Yeah, the ironic racism too.
Yeah, that too.
Now, it's probably good for him that he has a millennial wife that he seems to listen to.
Yes, Amber
Tamblyn.
Amber Tamblyn, right. Okay, I almost said Amber Heard. I was like, no, that's not correct.
No.
So let's talk about Bob and David. So they've now worked with each other on Ben Stiller Show. They become fans of each other, and they find themselves performing at a venue called Uncabaret, where LA comics go on stage and they don't tell stand-up routines. Instead, they tell improvised stories about their life. It was all like alternative comedy. It's like you have to break free of the punchline setup thing and just tell a funny story on the spot. And this is where people like Nancy Griffin and Dana Gould and I think Paul F. Tompkins would do their stories, and as well as like Janine Garofalo and Bob and David as well. Like, this was a venue to do new and challenging kinds of comedy.
It really helped probably that the first to become like a real mainstream-ish thing was Janine Garofalo. Like, she got to star in movies like Truth About Cats and Dogs. Like, when you imagined alternative girl, you imagined Winona Ryder and her together.
Absolutely.
Like, yeah.
And even in his book, like Bob Odenkirk says, Janine Garofalo invented alternative comedy. She is like the god of this world.
She doesn't get half the credit
Yeah.
she deserves for it. Yeah. And also he dated her for a time too.
Yeah.
Like, I heard Andy Dick joke with him about it. You were so in love with her, he said to her.
They seem like they'd be a cute couple, but
Yeah.
one that would be butting heads a lot. So yeah, On Cabaret was like legendary. Again, this is like a time travel mission I would have, is to go back in time, watch like a 31-year-old Dana Gould do a monologue about his father or something on stage, and watch Bob and David as well back in this little venue. The problem with On Cabaret was only veterans were getting booked. So like a lot of new comedians weren't getting a chance on the stage. So the creator of On Cabaret, she develops a new stage for new performers to do different things that weren't just the monologues, because the whole thing about a cabaret was, we want to break free of this format, but then they established a new format that people couldn't break free from.
Man, see, this is what happens. The revolutionary becomes the establishment.
Yeah. And Cross even says, like, the problem with Uncabaret was the audience was too smart. And we were getting lazy. Like, we knew that like they were on board with us immediately, so we didn't have to try very hard.
Yeah, I can see why they'd and a guy like Cross, I mean, so much of his comedy is trying to fight with the audience, and if they're friendly and too smart, then that's not what he wants.
It's very boring for him. So to address the Uncabaret's issue, something called the Diamond Club is formed. It's essentially a little theater in the back room of a strip club on Hollywood Boulevard. And this becomes a venue for wild sketch shows. And soon Bob and David start a sketch show called The Three Goofballs, which would often open with them introducing themselves, and the third goofball would be pronounced dead on the spot. They would come out of boxes. The third goofball would not come out of his box, and then they'd find him dead. So, and Brian Posehn was one of the three goofballs at one point, I think.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Man, I hadn't heard this Three Goofballs one. That's great.
But it was the origin of Mr. Show, in which it would be sketches performed live and then taped material. And Bob Odenkirk is the one who thought, okay, what we're doing now could be the basis of a TV show. And he invested a lot of his SNL writing money into performing and recording. And according to him, he invested like $18,000 into like filming pre-tape stuff and, you know, doing the work to buy like costumes and build sets and all this stuff. Like, he's pouring his money into this because he believes the Three Goofballs can be a TV show, whatever it turns into.
That's incredible that he. I guess we can thank SNL for giving him that kind of money for that.
It's that good network money. So this would later become Mr. Show. It moves out of the Diamond Club into a theater in Santa Monica. It becomes much more polished, but still very alternative. So thankfully, at this point, Bob Odenkirk has a contact at HBO because he had developed and filmed a pilot called Life on Mars with Janine Garofalo. You can watch it on you can watch it on YouTube. It's like cool Gen Xers hanging out in a coffee shop and then talking about their problems. It's very of the time.
I got to look this up. I've never seen this one.
And also at this point in time, Bob Odenkirk is playing Larry Sanders' agent on The Larry Sanders Show. So he is in the HBO fold, having worked on a show and having tried to develop a show for them.
Yeah, post Mr. Show, realizing its quality, that's when I started watching. I mean, look, I'd heard of Larry David before, but I wanted to see Bob Odenkirk and other Mr. Show alums appear on that series.
So at this point, HBO's director of development, Carolyn Strauss, she attended one of the Diamond Club shows. And as the shows were going on in LA, they were generating more and more buzz because it was like, oh, this is the hottest comic ticket in town. Only the coolest people are there. Only the coolest people are performing. It was becoming like a really hot event, but they weren't making any money off of it. They were investing money in it. And at this point, something very weird happens. Bob and David are given development money not to make a pilot, but to continue making this sketch show because they're like, this is essentially developing a pilot, but you're doing your material live and testing it out live. So I don't think this is really done that often, but they're given money by HBO to keep putting on these shows.
Oh, that's really cool. That's a funny way to frame it of like, well, this technically is developing a pilot because you're working on the sketches you're going to do. And I guess too, it's like at this time, HBO was only really starting to become like, there isn't Sopranos yet, for instance, or Sex in the City. You know?
Yeah, this is the Dream On, Tales from the Crypt, Larry Sanders era.
They are barely removed from like the Dream On and well, honestly, even to this day, they still kind of, the wink is like, no, this is prestige TV, but you're going to see some boobs. Like, there always is a tinge of like, I mean, in Sopranos, for instance, when I rewatched it, I was like, wow, they really do have a checklist in so many of the episodes of, hey, let's go to that strip club for this conversation. You know, we need to see some topless ladies.
Even in Mr. Show, there's like 1 or 2 episodes with breasts in them, with naked breasts.
I actually really love that one. The reveal of like, oh, see, this is why we had the warning of partial nudity in the episode, because the woman reading a storybook topless.
Okay, that was it. That was it. So HBO at this point, they begin putting on a comedy festival in Aspen, and Bob and David are asked to perform there, some of their Mr. Show material. They bomb horribly with their first performance, and this is when Bob's new manager, Bernie Brillstein, gives them advice. He's in the audience to watch this, and he's like, you guys, you need to come out and talk to the audience first, because they're not going to be on board with your avant-garde comedy if they don't get to know you first. So they did this, and it worked. Their next performance went over like gangbusters, as they say, and that's why the sketch show they have now begins with them introducing themselves as, you know, exaggerated versions of themselves, to let them know, like, let people know we're human beings. You're going to see some crazy stuff, but here are 2 regular people first.
And they both have their own like costuming of like, Bob is the more straight-laced one. David is the guy in like cargo shorts and a t-shirt. There's the cooler guy. It really does just set the scene. Like, Bernie Brillstein was really smart with that. I didn't know it came from him.
So after this, Bob, David, and the rest, they find themselves auditioning for HBO in Santa Monica with live performances of new material. And thankfully, Mr. Show with Bob and David is finally greenlit. Now, a few development executives at HBO cared about this, but nobody else at HBO did. They thought it was a bad, stupid idea, which is why they were given, for their first season, a very stingy 4-episode order. Was honestly the budget of 2 episodes.
It looks so cheap. That first season is so cheap looking, like, because they also filmed it as David points out in the first episode. We're filming in a fucking like
restaurant,
yeah. Like, and like, because why do we live in LA? Because a place as shitty as LA, because there's studios everywhere to film stuff in, and we're in a fucking restaurant.
He breaks character in the Ronnie Dobbs sketch to just yell about the conditions they're working under. So yes, they get their series. And HBO puts more but not quite enough faith in Mr. Show. So after this 4-episode season, it runs in November of 95, they're given a 6-episode season in November of 1996. So like every fall from 95 to 98, there's a new Mr. Show, each with increasingly more episodes.
I mean, even on their other shows, like The Oz didn't get a real 13-episode season order for a while either. Like, HBO only had so much money that they were going to bet on shows, and they definitely, probably a half an episode of Larry Sanders is equal to the Mr. Show budget.
Oh, for sure. You find out how little these people were being paid. Like, I think Jay Johnson said he was being paid $700 a week.
Oh, yes.
To work on a HBO show.
That's right, yeah.
And even on the commentary, like, Jerry Minor is one of their later cast members. He's like, oh, you go to Hollywood, you think you're going to be rich, and then you make $500 for appearing on an episode of Mr. Show. Oh,
David Cross has a funny story that he is an executive producer on the show, and he is getting calls from like his I believe a college money he was
student
loan debt, and they're like, well, the executive producer's here and he's here to tell you he has no money.
Couldn't even pay his 1980s college debts.
That's a low-paying TV show.
So yeah, after these 2 very paltry seasons, they're given 10-episode orders for seasons 3 and 4. And I like how a lot of my favorite shows from this era have 30 episodes, like UCB, Strangers with Candy, and Mr. Show all have 30 episodes each.
Yeah, isn't that so weird? They both end up with that limited amount, like the exact 30, and that Mr. Show ends up that way of just like they only had 2 real seasons. Like season 2, they're kind of figuring it out, but season 3 is the first real season of the show.
And, I've always felt like season 1 and 2 are a little weak. And it was nice to see in the book that Bob kind of agrees. And he says, like, in seasons 3 and 4, we realized we had to, like, please the crowd as well as ourselves, because seasons 1 and 2 are just like, they're fun to watch and very experimental, but they're also very self-indulgent. Like, what if we did this idea? Well, it's not that entertaining, but we're doing it. The fact that we're doing it is funny, right?
And by season 3, they had much more complete stories for a full episode that really paid off rewatching, which made it more of a comedy nerd favorite for sure.
So the shit hits the fan with season 4, because before the 4th season could even air, they learned their new time slot. That time slot is Monday at midnight, and they are not happy. I'm going to include some ads in this episode where they make fun of their awful time slot, and they're very vicious about it, but they know it's over. If HBO puts you on at Monday at midnight, they're just burning off your shows, essentially. They're giving you the dignity of at least airing them, but they're burning them off.
It's insane that HBO would spend that much money, and I mean... also another show they hated on HBO was Arliss. They're like, Arliss takes all of our money and we're way better than Arliss. But those commercials were so funny to see them go like, Mondays at midnight. Oh, nobody will be watching that, so it'll just be between you and me. It'll be nice and intimate. Yeah.
It's I love how vicious they were allowed to be about their own poor time slot.
I mean, yeah, no one watches anything at midnight on Mondays. No person does.
And, Bob was happy with what happened because of course he wanted to make more, but he thought, well, nobody would get to do this. And I think like the next 10 years of his career, he's really in limbo. He's not doing anything he wants to do, and the things he wants to do end quickly. So I feel like this is the best part of his life for the time being, until he starts getting the Breaking Bad fame that lets him do even more fun things.
And I mean, after 5 or 6 years, if you count all the pre-production they did on it in practice, it's like after that much of your life is over, like why fight anymore to make more of this thing and probably be treated even shittier if they did a season 5. I mean, I wish they'd have done a season 5, because I've seen afterwards, I saw all of them try to do things like Mr. Show elsewhere and just not as successfully. And I think if those ideas had been baked in the Mr. Show oven and presented to us, they would have all been probably funnier.
Yeah, I've like back in that time period, I would try to watch like the Mr. Show adjacent things that just weren't quite as good.
Yeah, like say the Jenny McCarthy sketch show. Yeah, that had some people involved in it, but wasn't half as funny.
So even though it was never very popular, Mr. Show was getting a ton of buzz from comedy nerds and weirdos online. But these
us.
Us, the people hosting this podcast. These were the days before TV seasons on DVD. Okay, just to remind all of you out there. And it was simply very, very hard to find. And like when it went off the air, this was like right before file sharing took off too. So this was a hard to find show. So at great expense to themselves, Bob and David personally dubbed a ton of VHS tapes and dropped them off at local video stores in LA that were cool. And they knew they couldn't charge money to rent them, so they include a note that says, please rent something else if you rent this. So they loved their own show so much they were trying to get people to watch it like physically. They were dropping tapes off at great expense to themselves. They were making these themselves.
All this extra work just to try to spread it around in the world before real file sharing. Like I do feel like not full episodes, but you could start downloading it off of like Kazaa or LimeWire. I think that's where I started downloading occasional episodes. But otherwise, like, I don't know. I feel like I watched it in some sketches from it or UCB in the pre-DVD days off of like Style Project was where some of the Alta Vista things, which you don't want to go to Style Project back then.
I'm glad YouTube came around, because you would have to go to like you're basically rotten.com adjacent projects to see funny sketches sometimes.
Yes, yeah. And, you don't even Google the website I just said.
Yes.
If you don't know what it is, you're better off not knowing.
Yeah, you had to be there.
Yeah.
But again, like I said up front, this all changes in 2002 because the DVD boom is upon us, which means even small shows like Mr. Show can get full releases with commentaries and extras. It'll never happen again. These are still in print, like I said up front. Lots of great commentaries, lots of great extras. And as I said before, these were the DVDs I would put in to make sure my friends were cool.
Yes, yeah. They were, after The Simpsons, my favorite DVDs. I would listen to the commentaries over and over again. I most of the time even really enjoyed when they would play characters on them, or that they would be very honest of like, this scene sucks. Let's somebody just talk over it with like, Jay, make up a scene over this instead. And they'd you'd get to know which sketches they didn't like, which were always fun to learn about.
And which sketches they did like, but that didn't get any feedback from the audience, like the Fallujah sketch.
Yes, God, the Fallujah sketch is one of the greatest. I do love that. Like the way. The look on the 11/12th president's face when he says "Mr. Graham's crackers," and then just like, yeah, so good.
That one is very visual, so we didn't include it, but it was up there in the running for episodes I did want to cover. Yeah, it's a parody of Amadeus, but with marching band music. That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
Yes, the DVDs come out in 2002, but as the DVDs are coming out, there was a Mr. Show movie. I'm reading about it online, and it's unfair that it's not being released. What is this? Well, folks, it was filmed in 2001, released in I think September of 2003.
If you don't count it came up in our Simpsons history because I wanted to talk about it with Mike Hanford on there because he knows Bob Odenkirk, but it sort of got like a film festival debut in 2002. But
Sundance.
Right, but if we're really counting when actual people could see it, I believe it was second half of 2003.
Yeah, never in theaters. It's called Run, Ronnie, Run, and to me it's inexplicable. It's the Mr. Show guys working in a different area that they're used to, in which they're trying to make like a Happy Madison style comedy, kind of like a rude, gross out comedy of the early aughts. And what they're doing is basically taking two sketches from season 1 and 2 of Mr. Show and making that into a movie with one of their honestly weakest characters. And I did laugh like 5 or 6 times at Mr. Show style jokes, but it's really weird to see them make this very lowbrow comedy, but also like trying to elevate it at the same time. And these two things are really at odds with each other. And it's not a good movie. If you're curious, check it out. It's like 75 minutes. I was curious. I'm happy I finally saw it, but I was not having a great time.
It's full of Happy Madison style choices, including casting Arlie Ermy in it in a very obvious role. And I mean, it's fun to hear a Tool song about ass kicking fat kid over a scene. Like, that's fun. And I'm trying to remember, and the Jackie Chan parody credits is funny.
Yeah.
I like that. But yeah, and then there's deleted scenes on the DVD with a few better jokes in it. And Jack Black, well, he's just funny when you see him on screen. And if he's going to sing a song with the C word in it, then you're gonna chuckle.
I thought that was a little too try hard for me. Maybe it was funnier in 2001 when they filmed it.
Well, I like the way the little squirrel says it back and forth with him.
Yeah. I did like a few of the Mr. Show jokes in Run, Ronnie, Run. I was expecting more. Like, there's a flashback with each time like Ronnie and his wife got engaged. And in one year it's 1988, and in the background there's a pennant that says "Let's go 1988," and then in 1994 there's a pennant in the background that says 1984, the year of years. So just like really funny Mr. Show jokes struggling to break through this like very lowbrow comedy that was taken away from them by the director, who I think they're on better terms with now, but they were publicly very mad at Troy Miller, who, to be fair, really made the Mr. Show sketch series what it was, but he really pulled rank on them. And I think in his biography, Bob kind of blames himself. He says, "I didn't give Troy enough credit." And you can work with people without being mean to them. And I don't think I was nice enough to Troy Miller.
I mean, he was, I've heard Scott Aukerman, who is good friends with Bob Odenkirk still to this day, but he was like, Bob and David could be very withholding in their, compliments, I think was how he put it. And but also in Run, Ronnie, Run, there is that really great like long shot of the chase after him. But it's like it's a Cops parody and a Survivor parody, and like by the time you're seeing it, it's 2003. Like, who gives a shit about a Survivor parody then?
Yeah, I mean, even a Cops parody, because that was like all kind of cutting edge comedy in 1995 when that episode aired, where it's like, what if a guy got famous from being arrested on Cops so many times? By 2003, Cops is still running, but everything, other reality shows are so much more popular. So seeing a Cops parody movie then, it just feels like so misguided.
And also, Ronnie Dobbs as a character in the show is a racist domestic abuser. Like, that is core to his character. if you want to make a Happy Gilmore style guy, he can't be that to be your main character of a movie. If he had stayed that, it'd be a different movie, and that wasn't the movie they were making. So they have to lighten up Ronnie Dobbs and just make him kind of like a good old boy fun guy with diverse friends. And,
he's still problematic, but he's the least problematic of his friends.
Yeah, if guys listen to the audio version of the book Hollywood Said No, which has their other 2 movie scripts that I still don't think would have been as good as a great season 4 Mr. Show episode, but they are sketch movies that are funny. And one is a pure sketch movie, and one is, it takes that Pit Pat story from season 1 and expands it into like a parody of Clinton era James Carville political situation. It's called Hooray for America.
Okay.
And both are funnier than, as a performed script, funnier than Run, Ronnie, Run.
And it didn't help that as they were filming this, Joe Dirt hit theaters.
Yeah, which is way better at being it. I heard the Reno 911 guys say this too. Sketch comedy movies are almost never good, or they're hard to actually make. Like even in Bob's book, he admits the Meaning of Life is a weak-ass movie, but it's still pretty brilliant, even with great sketches by Monty Python. But even it's like, it cannot compare to Holy Grail or Life of Brian.
Yeah, I guess like I really like Brain Candy. I thought like there was a period in my life where I was like, oh, it could have been better. But upon revisiting it again, I'm like, oh, this is so good. And I think they figured out how to make a movie out of a sketch comedy show, because you're constantly visiting new characters. Although there's one story, you're just really stuck with Ronnie Dobbs in Run, Ronnie, Run. And Bob Odenkirk, I feel like he could have been in the movie a lot more, because whenever his weird character appears, I'm laughing.
Yeah.
And I think they're just hanging too much on Ronnie, who is a very limited character in what he does.
I love his speech about like, I was born without an accent. That's his sad story. And hey, look, I like parodies of Rumble in the Bronx in movies. That can be funny.
Yeah, but in 2003?
No, not so much. Yeah.
So this history is running long, so we can talk about it and should acknowledge other people on Mr. Show. We don't have full biographies of them, but of course, Tom Kenny, of course, we know he would go on to be a very famous voice actor. He was voice acting at this point, and I remember, like a lot of people, as much as he liked Mr. Show, he was happy to leave it because he was filming that medieval times informational video or
the
whatever.
world's oldest educational film.
I mangled every word of that. He was in a wizard costume. It was like 1,000 degrees out, and that's when he got the call, like, you're voicing SpongeBob. He was like, thank God.
I remember their tale of realizing that like pornography was filmed there, and then they recognized it.
Jill Talley, who is married to Tom Kenny, Paul F. Tompkins, podcast superstar today, Brian Posehn, John Ennis, Scott Aukerman, Jerry Minor, Dino Stamatopoulos, Brent Forrester, Bill Odenkirk, and yes, even Jay Johnston. And we'll talk about him soon. But in his book, Bob Odenkirk says, and there were no women writers, and yes, that was a huge mistake, and no, I can't correct it, and I feel bad about that.
Yeah, he knows it. He knows it now. I mean, I think he knows that he needs to acknowledge that too, but I think he's honest about that. But I mean, it's not like, that's in that book. I was like, well, wait a minute. I know you guys did the episode about the Mr. Show Boys Club, which was your literal response to that critique then, which shows you how they felt. It's not, so they can't even claim like innocence that they didn't know. It's like, no, you felt, we're a boys club, but whatever. Girls, or they joked that girls can that they intentionally sideline girls, and that they upped their boys clubbiness.
And it's funny because they knew so many funny women, but none of them were writing on the show. Some of them were performing in the show, but none of them are writing for the show.
Yeah, like why didn't Sarah Silverman write for the show when she was acting in it? Like,
yeah, it's very strange.
Yeah.
And yeah, Jay Johnston, he was at January 6th. Now, as far as I know, so I don't agree with being into Trump or whatever. As far as I know, he went to a rally. He was not committing violence at the Capitol.
Yeah, I feel I definitely, obviously, you shouldn't be at January 6th. Like, and don't do that. But
don't do a January 6th.
But
I'll do it for a good reason, at least.
But I felt a little bad for spreading it around the day it was released, because I was like, you know what? I don't like the FBI or the most American police state stuff is bad. And when they released that picture, it was to defame him. It was to, and that was because he, to my knowledge, and I Googled it too, I don't believe he has been charged with anything like the other insurrectionists have been. So it's like, if the FBI didn't have anything on him, then they just wanted to destroy this guy and ruin his reputation, which they did. And I mean, he should have known that would happen and not be there. And it sounds like Jay Johnston has a lot of problems. I think, too.
And I feel bad, as much as he's a Trump fan and I don't like that. He's made me laugh a lot. And also the events of January 6th, where there was a rally, and then Trump says, let's go to the Capitol. I'll be right there with you. He doesn't go. Everyone else does. So as far as I know, Jay Johnston was just at the rally. I don't like that. But I think people assume he's like busting in like windows and stuff.
Yeah, which is like he'd be arrested if that was the case. But his career is over. He's not on Bob's Burgers anymore. We can't do any more damage to him. But I wish that wasn't his fate, because he's so funny. He's so funny on the commentaries. And I feel like Trump did appeal to a lot of people like him whose lives were maybe not going so well. He's in his 50s trying to get acting work. He obviously has enough money to fly to Washington, D.C., so maybe not doing too poorly, but I feel bad. It sounded like he had other like addiction issues perhaps too.
Yeah.
No, and he was real funny on the Sarah Silverman program as well, playing a cop. But no, the only other thing I'd add to that is I have occasionally heard Paul F. Tompkins or Scott Aukerman wink towards it in some comedy podcast, but I'm sure they're very uncomfortable about it too. They don't want to name him or talk about it because it's still their friend. They don't want to, they see their friend hurting, I think. But I've heard Tompkins and Aukerman on one podcast say they somehow January 6th come up and they say like, we're both Mr. Show alums that can say we were not at January 6th.
Yeah, and in Bob's book, he doesn't say anything negative about Jay or even Andy Dick, who is a known felon.
Yes, yeah.
So he's being very, very diplomatic, I will say.
Yeah, it's it makes me so sad. But yeah, I mean, and you know what? If folks love Mr. Show as well, a lot of people didn't watch the sketch show, the Comedy Bang Bang TV show version that has its head writer is Scott Aukerman, who was like 25 on season 4 of Mr. Show, writing on it with his then comedy partner BJ Porter. If you really enjoy Mr. Show, I would still say check out the Comedy Bang Bang TV show, because it's full of Mr. Show style sketches, and Bob and David make appearances on the series as well, as do other alumni like Jerry Minor, and actually I think Jay Johnston also makes an appearance in the show.
Sure, a lot of things happened before 2021, folks.
Yes, whole lots of stuff.
Yeah. Anything else we need to include here?
Yeah, I mean, don't watch the movie, and I mean, they would go on tour a few times. They came here. I remember I didn't get to see them when they did their Hooray for America tour, but I remember hearing that Odenkirk got very testy, that he came out with the crime stick in the character outfit, and people just start yelling at him like, shake the crime stick, and he yells back like, wait for it, I'll do it, just shut up.
Yeah, I was at a Stella show, and that's Michael Ian Black, David Wayne, and Michael Showalter, and they were yelling the Barry and Levon quotes at Michael Ian Black from the States. And he was mad because they weren't even getting the quotes right. They're like, it's this many pounds of pudding, you fucking idiots.
God, I hate that. Man, see, maybe this is self-hate we're at like, you're not as good a fan as me, but it's like, shut the fuck up. You're at a show with other fans. You don't have to prove the line.
You watch something a million other people watch. Congratulations.
When I was at the V Variety reunion this year, thankfully nobody shouted until they asked for a literal Q&A to be asked questions. Otherwise, they did not. Nobody in the audience yelled catchphrases at Johnny Blue Jeans or the rest of them.
And I also will say up front, I don't know if I need to say trigger warning, but this is late 90s edgy humor that we think is funny, but it's very much of the time period. So there might be some things that we talk about that aren't as appropriate today, let's just say, or would be handled better today. But I feel like those moments are very few on Mr. Show in general.
It aged better than some, but yeah, there's when I rewatched the entire series with my husband, there were a few times where I had to go like, look, it was then, and he totally understood too. But I think there was a couple times where I had to say, like, now, wait, this is making fun of that. It may look like they're making fun of, say, the handicapped, but they're really making fun of people who play the handicap in an insulting way in a show or in a movie. If I want to shout out one of my last favorite sketches in it, it is the Teardrop Awards, just because I love how he sings, like a mouthful of sores. Just such a funny song.
His Brian Wilson song.
Take it from me, a guy who's had mouth sores. I know the value of a mouth without sore.
I love when they make Bob sing because he's so bad at it.
It's so great. Yeah.
So we're going to take a quick break and come back and talk about the episode, The Story of Everest. Hang in there.
Red balloon is here to take your hand and steer. Red balloon will help you fly away. Red balloon has a tale to tell of candy, fun, and golden bells. Red balloon will take your hand, lead you through a magic land. Red balloon will push you down a well. Red balloon will send you straight to hell. You've got to follow your balloon. You've got to follow your balloon. Red balloon will lead you on. Red balloon will make you strong. You've got to follow.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the break for this month's episode of What a Cartoon All About, Mr. Show. I am one of your hosts, Bob Mackey, ready to head up Heaven's Chimney. Who is here with me today?
It's insane, this guy's taint. It's Henry Gilbert. Hey.
And yes, it's April, so we're doing a fun thing, as you've noticed, and we're looking at one of our favorite sketch shows, Mr. Show. And we hope you folks out there are liking it. If you want to support the show and get a lot more bang for your buck, head on over to patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. Sign up there for $5 a month to get a lot of stuff. You'll get access to all these podcasts 1 week at a time and ad-free, and also access to everything behind the $5 paywall. That is over 150 bonus mini-series podcasts that you haven't heard if you're not a patron. And you also get monthly access to new episodes of Talking Futurama and Talk King of the Hill, all for $5 a month, all at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. And there is a $10 level as well. When you sign up for that, you can access all the $5 stuff naturally, but you can also access one extremely long podcast once a month, only for patrons of that level or higher. And what is that, Henry?
Bob is talking about the What a Cartoon movie podcast, where we go through an animated feature film, crazy in depth, just like we do an episode of Mr. Show. If you're subscribed on this free feed, you get to hear the preview of it each month. But if you want to hear the full things, which are often over 5 or even 6 hours long, you got to sign up to the $10 level at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. The live action thing is continuing with our movie this month, where we're talking about Little Shop of Horrors, the 1986 adaptation of that off-Broadway musical. We both love that movie so much. I can't wait for us to record it. We haven't done it yet, but I think it's going to be great. And if you sign up at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons, you'll get to hear that and all of our previous What a Cartoon movies, over 50 at this point, often over 5 hours long, and you'd get to hear our longest one ever, 6.5 hours, about Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and a ton of other classics in the back catalog, as I like to say, Akira to a Goofy movie, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse to Beavis and Butthead to the Universe. Just this year, we've covered Dumbo, Batman vs. Superman, World's Finest, and Chicken Run. We have so much more cool stuff coming the rest of this month, too. We already know what our next 4 are going to be, and I think you're going to love it. So please, check it all out for yourself at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons.
And if you've never signed up for Patreon before, it's very easy to do so. And once you sign up, you're given a code. You just drop that code into whatever you use to listen to podcasts, and that way you can download our bonus podcast alongside your free podcast as part of your podcasting lifestyle. And there is an app for any smart device you might have, so you can access our bonus content that way as well. So no matter which way you do it, it's so easy to access all the content waiting for you at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. That's it for this break. Now get ready to hear us collide into the wall full of thimbles that is the story of Everest.
So, David, when are we going to do Mr. Show?
I don't know, man. I'm booked.
How about Monday at midnight?
Monday doesn't have a midnight.
Yeah, it does. Look.
Oh, wow. Okay, great. I mean, nobody would be watching then.
Right.
Then that way it's just for us.
Right.
All right, Mondays at midnight.
Where?
HBO. It's
You
right
got
around
it.
the corner.
Mondays at midnight on HBO. I'll see you there.
Okay, cool.
Mr. Show with Bob and David.
Okay, the objective is to infiltrate the homes of America.
We infiltrate Junior in his basement room while he's smoking a cigarette. How are we going to do it? We're going to get in through the television set.
When no one's looking.
The least watched time ever.
A busy work night when everybody's sleeping.
Mondays at midnight.
Better yet, we're going to do it on HBO. Ha ha! Mr. Show, Mondays at midnight.
Why would you put a show on Monday at midnight? Exactly.
Mr. Show with Bob and David.
Said goodbye to a friend today. He was off to find some fun. And when he came back, he never came back because his life was done. Oh, I don't know why so many people die. But I bet if they could talk to God, they'd say, thank you for the ride, God. Thank you for the ride. Thank you for the ride, God. Thank you for the ever-loving ride. Got a ride from God, did you hear? I got a ride from the G-Man today. He picked me up and all I could say was, thank you, man. You're the big boss man. You're God and you gave me a ride. Thanks for the ride. Ooh, ride.
So we're back to talk about season 4's The Story of Everest. It aired at some point in November of 1998. I have the exact date in case you care. If you were up late on Monday on November 16th, 1998 at midnight, you probably saw this.
What person would ever have seen this then? Like their families didn't even watch it then. Ackerman has such a funny story. When he was writing on the 4th season, his parents didn't watch an episode until they went to a hotel room because they didn't want to sign up for HBO. and his friend pointed out to him, like, the cost of that hotel room would cover like 2 or 3 months of HBO, but they were that against signing up for a premium channel.
Wow. I think his parents are like conservative Christians too.
They definitely are. Yeah, he also said his mom watched the episode and she's like, so what'd you think? She's like, well, you gained a little weight, haven't you? Like, so
it's a very mom response to something you've done. So we open with the iconic HBO original programming Static Angel Ident, which I'm sure more people associate with The Sopranos.
Yeah. The sound, I do hear The Sopranos opening after the but then after that I think of the Mr. Show theme, though often they don't start with the theme.
To me, the Mr. Show theme begins with the Static Angel sound.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it feels wrong without it. Like I feel like it got replayed on Comedy Central like later in the aughts, but I can't recall if they kept the static thing on there or not.
I hope so. So we open with a little cold open here. We find out that Mr. Show is a Lethal Injection production, and this is all a parody of Death Row Records. So instead of the little guy in the electric chair for Death Row, it's like handcuffs with like a syringe between them.
That might look like genitals, perhaps.
Yes. Yeah. And we find out that Mr. Show is part of the Lethal Injection family of conglomeratory interests. And with everything that we see on the screen, there's like a crosshair over it, and then when it transitions to the next thing, there's like a bang sound effect.
I love when they get to the end of the list, they do like 4 bullets on it. And of all the things they could say, taffy apples instead of candy apples. I love that.
I mean, I bet they debated about that, but taffy apples is funnier. So yeah, record labels, international drug trade, movies, taffy apples, and TV shows. And it's all executive produced by Sweetie Pie Jonas from his cell in our new 3 to 5 year headquarters. It's a stock footage of a prison.
It's such a funny idea of like, yes, that Suge Knight, I guess that it's like Sugar Knight, and they then take that to be Sweetie Pie Jonas, like that, which pays off beautifully. And yeah, I mean, at the time of this was like 18 months after Biggie, 2 years after Tupac died and 18 months after Biggie Smalls died. So, and Suge Knight was in jail. And I mean, they did a bigger sketch about the Death Row Records and all of that with the East Coast, West Coast ventriloquist battles episode.
I like that one more. This one is like, it's a kind of joke I saw a lot at this time of the idea of like someone in jail but still being like successful at business and still like running their enterprise.
Prisons are too nice.
I think the first Duckman episode had like a Hannibal Lecter style character like as a celebrity in prison.
Well, there was also the feeling like that a lot of rappers were releasing stuff from prison or were seemingly, coming out more famous after prison and selling records and stuff. So there was the sense of like, oh, they're getting famous by being criminals, like which. Who cares? Like, if the police state's going to come down on them, let them get at least rich off of it.
This is not the best stuff in this episode. It just is very of the time. So we get the Mr. Show logo man, a very 90s design, and also the very 90s theme song. Like, I know it was written in the 80s, but the Kids in the Hall theme song is the 90s to me, and this one is as well. The second I hear it, I'm transported back to the 90s.
Oh, man, hearing that, Kids in the Hall, that's so funny that we were talking about all these other 30 episode things. We were spoiled by Kids in the Hall's over 100 episodes, right?
There's a lot of them, 5 seasons.
The logo has always bugged me because it's such a Gen X whatever, man. Like
this is a Gen X whatever man show, though.
Yeah, I know. When I act like that, I just quote the episode like, hang out and do whatever. Like that character they were making fun of still is who owns all of Silicon Valley stuff. Like,
the Grass Valley Greg guy?
Yeah, who invented the delete key and got lucky with one thing and then just wastes all his money on. When I was rewatching that with my husband, I told him like, oh, this one hasn't aged a day. Like, this is still very true.
I just remember, we're going to be quoting a lot of episodes. I just remember, work is play, tofuti break today.
His defeated way, like, hey, it tastes like ice cream. It tastes like ice cream.
And every show, I forgot about this. It's been a while since I watched Mr. Show, but every episode opens with, in the first 2 seasons, it was Mary Lynn Rice Cub saying, hey, everybody, it's Bob and David. In seasons 3 and 4, it's a character from a sketch you'll see later saying it's Bob and David. In this case, it's Jay Johnston as his Explorer character saying, hey, everybody, I claim this show for Bob and David.
I love that. I loved every time where it starts with it, especially because you haven't met the character yet, so it just feels rando when you watch it the very first time. And then on constant rewatches, when you see the guy at the start, that's when you remember, like, it's this episode, this guy's in it. Like, when I see John Ennis as the mustachioed dad in his undershirt, I then know it's like, this is the Streakers episode. Right. Yes.
The future Streakers episode.
So many naked butts in that one. Men butts.
Hey, Bob Odenkirk, some of his earliest sketches, he did get naked.
Yeah, that was his improv thing. That comic relief thing where he did naked improv. I heard him on another interview making fun of how, like, after he left, Whoopi Goldberg, like, whatever that was. And he's like, what do you mean? It's obvious what it was. Why are you acting like, ooh, that was so weird? Like,
I feel like we've only just stopped men getting naked for funny sketch shows. I feel like that was an easy joke to do forever. I saw the Birthday Boys live about 10 years ago, and one of their sketches was 2 of the guys completely naked.
Yes. We saw Mike Hanford naked in person before we had him on a podcast.
True. You can't say that about anyone else.
No, I mean, it was a style at the time. I blame it was in the air before this, but I do think the Will Ferrell nude scene in the college movie, Old School. Thank you. Yeah, I think that really hastened it, and of course, it's not a thing you do anymore because dudes like Louis C.K. ruined the fun because it was revealed like, oh no, they liked doing that to jack off. Like this, the fake non-sexuality of it was extremely sexual to them and crossing boundaries.
When they perform this naked sketch, they're filling their spank bank for later.
Exactly. Yeah. It ruins the fun for innocent nude men and also appreciators of nude men who like seeing that for jokes.
I purely appreciate the comedy that comes out of nude men.
Sure.
I'm laughing when I take my clothes off. So Bob and David launch into their hellos and thank yous, and David announces that Sergeant Manners is going to be here to teach us how to tie a napkin.
Bob's reaction to it makes me think it is an ad lib that throws him off. I think it was intentional.
But they start things off with a trip to the world's horniest mad scientist, and that's when Bob puts on fake breasts, and then they start a very bad sketch that is soon interrupted.
Doctor, what have you done to me?
Oh, what are you doing to me, my Liebchen?
Hey, yo, Bob and Dave.
Yeah.
Hey, I cut that scene, fools.
Oh, folks, this is Sweetie Pie Jonas, our new executive producer.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, check it out. I got the motherfucking revisions for this week's episode, bitch.
Rewrites?
rewrites, man. Funny this shit up.
Well, we're gonna pick up the pace later. I
Man,
think that...
shut the fuck up.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sorry,
Yes,
sorry.
I'm sorry.
You know what? I'm tired of you motherfuckers. Hey, David, put on a goddamn costume before I put the smack down on your silly ass.
Go.
All right, later.
Sir, okay, thank you.
Hey, Opie Taylor, check this out, man. I don't know what you're trying to run here, man, but I need some motherfucking copy machines for myself. I need a 3-hole punch, and I need some goddamn fax machines, all right? Hop to it, motherfucker.
The actor playing Sweetie Pie Jonas is a rapper called Freeze Love, and he's still out doing his thing. He's got like a Twitter account and everything. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
I also think like gutsy for him to take on a sketch that is a sort of making fun of Suge Knight, who I don't think he had the best sense of humor about people making fun of him.
Not really.
Yeah, so I'd actually been scared a little bit. I mean, what Jerry Minor talks about how they did a sketch that he started that was making fun of the Nation of Islam and Farrakhan, and he was a little worried about it. But then he realized, oh wait, nobody watches this, so I'm not getting in trouble.
It's a very 98 thing to hear an audience explode with laughter at the mention of the word episode. It's just like that was new comedy. That was a new thing people had heard about for the first time.
At least for the white nerdy audience watching it. Yeah, no, I was like, Izzo, what is this way of speaking? Yeah,
we were 4 years from Doggy Fizzle Televizzle, you know.
That's right. Yeah, which that was I'd have probably seen Wonder Shows in anyway, but it also was Mr. Show adjacent. Like Cross was a big part of it for sure.
Yeah, that's true.
It also was like to hear somebody say "shut the fuck up" on a TV show was you didn't hear that in 1998.
We're like an old man is talking. This is what our conversation is. But like if you go back to our South Park episode, the one we did for the TV show and the movie, it's like, well, this was so novel to hear someone say the word "fuck" on TV. Now I'm just so bored with it.
I know. Well, every podcaster out there just says every swear word they can think of all of the time, and it does lose any of its impact or power.
The swear economy was very misbalanced back then, which made every swear more precious.
now I also think this terrible bad sketch they start with, I feels like now after hearing Odenkirk's memoir, I'm like, oh, this is your hate of Chicago style improv coming through, of just like the wacky character with the silly, with the I've got boobs now, whoa,
just like very broad, very very broad,
and the German accent that is just ripping off Dr. Strangelove. You're like, oh, what are you doing to me?
Mein Liebchen.
Mein Liebchen. Yeah.
So over the video of Sweetie Pie Jonas, we hear David as the narrator saying, he's talking about how it now costs $800,000 to jail just one criminal for a year, and then there's a bunch of comparisons with video to show you it's like that's enough money to send a family of 5 to college, and a family of 5 is standing in front of college going yay, and it's like there's an old lady there too.
Yeah, I love it's mom, dad, Billy, sister, and the granny. Yeah, this captures Mr. Show comedy style on commentary on America perfectly, because they take like information you'd hear in a documentary, like very soberly about what's so fucked up about America, and then they try to frame it in a stupid way for dumb Americans to understand.
Like how it's enough money to send a family of 5 on a 97-day rafting expedition.
Yes, yeah, that would never stop, which is just hell. Yeah.
In case I'm sure we said it up front, but the flow of Mr. Show is like, we transition from sketches, like there's like a baton passed off narratively between sketches, and this is one of them, because then it cuts into them talking about how at Pendleton State Prison there's a new program allowing prisoners to be productive members of society while serving out their terms, and this is where we get the rapist sketch. Now hold on, everybody. It's very funny.
The connector thing was them being Monty Python. Like they're such Python addicts that they're like, oh, Python connects everything. You know, it is much easier if you do it Kids in the Hall style of a sketch is over and now black and white footage over a riff from the theme song. And it's an easy reset. And I think it's great on the commentaries they admit of like, You know what? The connectors didn't. Why did we give ourselves this difficulty?
Yeah.
We didn't have to.
And they make fun of the bad ones, like, oh, look, here's a picture of the next sketch.
Right, yes. And also, if you want some real facts about it, today, according to California.gov, it costs $106,000 per year to incarcerate an inmate in prison.
What are we doing?
Well, if you just gave it to somebody to not do crime, then America falls apart. You can't do that. You have to spend that much money to keep someone in there. And also, it costs most groups that are against the death penalty, which I agree with. They say that it costs double as much to keep someone on death row as it does and that's a conservative estimate, than it does to keep them in prison. Prison costs a bunch of money. But that's like what I said. Mr. Show highlights a real, like, liberal left-wing cause and then makes a joke out of it to be like, we should be spending that to send a family of 5 on a river rafting expedition.
And they're also making fun of sex offender laws, because we get a shot in this new sketch. We get a shot of the home of Larry Cleast, rapist. But you wouldn't know it if it wasn't for the friendly reminders Larry is required by law to provide. So we see the front of his home. There are signs in the front yard. One says, "Beware of rapist." Another one says, "I am a rapist." And then underneath it's his name, Larry Cleast. Now, they're having a lot of fun just saying the word rape because it is 1998 on HBO. I will say that. But I love seeing this man humiliated. It's a joke at the expense of a horrible man.
Yeah, and it should... it should follow rapists, all of them, the rest of their lives. Like,
this is what like cancel culture should be. There should be a man following you around, letting everyone know what you did, because that's what happens to Larry. He's got to put out an ad in the newspaper. There's a picture of him, the title Larry Cleast Rapist, and there's a word bubble out of his mouth that says, "Hello, I'm a rapist." And then there's like clip art of balloons and rainbows. And yes, in the aughts, that was my Something Awful Forums avatar. the Larry Cleast paper ad.
You know, if I were to, I think the only avatars I fucked with for Mr. Show, I think Pit Pat. I really love Pit Pat, the non-sexual, genderless spokes thing, I think was
Yes, Take it from me, I love you.
Also, the registered sex offender thing. I feel like the first time I heard of that in a comedic context was The Big Lebowski. I think it was with the character Jesus in it. That was the first time I'd heard that. And there have been 8 million comedy sketches about it.
It feels like it was a somewhat new or novel concept to comedy writers at the time, because I feel like a lot of sketches in the mid to late 90s were about this idea.
Yeah, I think I didn't see SNL do one of these until like 10 years ago or something, where, I'll admit it was a clever way of doing it, that it's Halloween. Will Forte, dressed similar to Odenkirk in this sketch, shows up at the front door and he's like, "Hello, yes, trick-or-treating, and I'm a sex offender." They're like, "So are you dressed as one?" Like, "Well, it's Halloween, and I am dressed, and I'm a sex offender." And you can see where it goes from there.
It all sounds very funny.
Yes.
We find out that this rapist lives like any normal non-raping person would. This is all dialogue from the show.
Yes.
And we see Larry, played by Bob Odenkirk. He walks out of his house. He picks up the newspaper, and then behind him trails a man with a sandwich board, played by Jay Johnston. The sandwich board says, "I'm with a rapist." It's pointing at Larry, and he's announcing that Larry is coming through. So in our next clip here, let's hear about Larry's day.
Rapist coming!
He goes to work accompanied by an assigned state-licensed public warning engineer.
Rapist here! Rapist backing out!
Larry can even drive himself to work.
Rapist coming. Don't get raped. Rapist coming.
Cold call's my favorite part of the day. Hello, I'm Larry Cleast. I'm a rapist. Have you considered insurance? Hello, I'm Larry Cleast. I'm a rapist. Are you interested? Hello, I'm calling about insurance. Please don't hang up, please. My name is Larry. I'm a rapist. People don't seem to be interested in insurance these days. I think the industry's in a slump.
I love the quiet dignity that Bob tries to put into this character who just lives his life in shame as he should.
Yes.
He's just in deep denial.
And also he loves cold calls. Like, that shows you this guy also sucks because he wants this job of call. I have to think his employer got a big tax break for hiring Larry.
I think so.
I love that. He's like, please don't hang up, please. My name is Larry. I'm a rapist. I think, though, too, this is a very 90s vision of the government, that the government would invest that kind of money into making a job for somebody like the engineer that follows someone around.
Like, I assume the premise of the sketch is because the prison is too expensive, this is the alternative, and like they wouldn't even do this.
There's no alternative to prison. It's just more prison. And honestly, we're too nice as it is. We are still having tough on crime Democrat talking. I was just seeing it the other day of like, actually, Republicans, you want to cut budget to the FBI and police. And it's like, fuck.
We like cops more.
I hate it. I mean, even if it does, I will admit, when Biden tweeted that, there were a lot of pissed off conservative in the replies there about it. So I guess it did troll them, but I hate it. I hate it. The more cops doesn't fix anything. We do this every single time.
Yes, it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
So we have more of Larry's day. He goes into the break room. Of course, the what's the safety engineer or whatever, the warning engineer.
Oh, yes.
Announces rapist on a break. Everyone leaves. Larry's just sitting alone. The sandwich board guy won't get him more coffee. And then we have Larry carrying on. He's come up with a fun way to introduce this fact about his life, where he does a cold call. He says, "Hello, insurance is my game. Larry's my name. Raping was another game of mine." And hello. So
I hate how much I laugh at that now.
It's a funny, like he the character is trying to find a way to make this at least playful, but for obvious reasons, people can't get beyond that and just hang up the phone.
And that he is trying his best to find a way to make his job work. Like it, and yeah, I mean, again, it's a funny. It's about as dark as comedy gets, the raping was another game of mine line. But I'm laughing.
Hey,
I'm laughing.
It's funny. I'm laughing. But we're transitioning out of this uncomfortable sketch.
Yes, yeah.
Because the announcer then says the program is extending to other worlds. And then we see how this press conference is going on. David is playing a character, and he's like, "Bill Thompson, pedophile, sodomized my nephew." What is going on at that zoning board?
I still think I did bring that into my life of like that high pitch thing after like to try to move on from a thing. You just said like, what's going on with it? What? Like, yeah.
And then we transition into the clumsy waiter sketch, because it's like, even the world of love, this system is being employed, and it's Brian Posehn with his date, and he tells his host he has a reservation under Peter Chechesnik, murderer, and the host, David Cross, can't find his reservation, and Posehn says, "Could you look under Strangled 7 Prostitutes?" It's the late 90s.
Yes.
And
it's
then
time for dead hooker jokes.
Yeah. And then he cheerfully leads Brian Posehn to his table.
with a woman who looks like she could be a sex worker.
Yeah.
That he probably will kill that night. Yeah. Posehn, it's typecasting, but he looks like a murderer. Like he has a great joke there. He says like, "I'm the type of guy who can't say the word cute kid to you." Like, it just seems all wrong.
But now he has kids, so as if the kid's holding his hand, he can point out other cute kids, I think.
I walked by him and his kid at Comic-Con 2016, and we were staying in the same hotel, and he was coming out of the elevator. I needed to get into the elevator to an appointment, and only in a second did I take 2 steps past him. I'm like, "You rule," and he's like, "Thanks," and he just kept walking.
How would he say, like, "Thanks"?
I think it was more like, "Thanks." Like, yeah, I could have told him all the ways I think he's great, and how also in the Sarah Silverman program, him, a straight man, playing a bearded gay dude in a relationship with another bearish man,
Steve Agee.
It really it was representation I needed then. And
I think so.
Occasionally my husband and I, when we might have an argument, we remember like, is this a Tab fight from the Sarah Silverman show? Are we fighting about Tab here?
Well, I will say I saw Brian Posehn with my wife when we were just friends, and he was very funny.
He is a funny guy.
Yeah.
I need to see his more recent stand-up. I should see some of that.
Now, Bob Odenkirk hates this sketch so much, to the point where he did a remake of it in the With Bob and David Netflix show. And he hated it so much that he wanted to put a graphic on the screen that says time until sketch ends with a timer. But David vetoed it because he wanted to give the audience a chance to decide if they like it or not.
And somebody might like it. Yeah, he has a good point. Like, hey, don't tell people it sucks before it happens. I didn't know it was seen by them as a hated sketch until the commentary. Like, it wasn't my favorite sketch either. Like, I mean, waiter sketches in general are kind of like broad and silly anyway. And I don't think this like plays on it enough. It's not complicated enough to be a great complicated sketch. It needs like 3 other complications.
It's too complicated for like SNL, but not complicated for Mr. Show. And it's really about the tortured logic of their like refund system here.
Yeah. It needs like, and yeah, when they redid it as a dry cleaning sketch and with Bob and David, it just, it did feel like they found like a slight extra layer to it. Though there is a little bit about like, rewatching that season, like, oh yeah, everybody's kind of old now in the sketches. I feel like their return sketch season was not as successful as the Kids in the Hall return season.
And they only made 3 or 4, and only 3 are online now.
That's right, yes.
Yeah, I guess we could talk about that later, but we pan over to a nice business dinner. It's John Ennis, Jill Talley, and Jerry Minor. He's announcing the entire dinner is on him, and Bob...
Oh, get it?
Oh, yes, that's right. Actually, I think I caught that for the first time.
Yeah, that was first time I got it. It's a very... That lets you know this is an Odenkirk scene, that it would start with a clever first line like that.
And Bob comes out as the waiter, delivers the entrees, but as Bob hands over the creamy steak soisé, he spills it down the front of Ennis's new suit. Bob apologizes and tells him, it's my first day waiting tables. And David comes out to soothe the customer.
I'll tell you what, take your suit to any cleaners you choose, send us the bill, and we will gladly pay half, okay? Enjoy your meal.
All right, thank you. Half?
Sir, we insist. It's not a problem at all.
No.
Sir, it's very nice of you to offer, but this is our policy.
But you should pay for the whole thing. I mean, their waiter spilled my meal on me.
Yes, and that meal is free. We will gladly bring you another meal and charge you double. Charlie?
Yes.
Charlie, bring this gentleman another meal.
Yes.
In fact, Charlie?
Yes.
Bring him 2.
Yes.
The second will be regular price, and we will only charge you for 3, okay? And you mustn't be concerned. This is our policy.
But I don't want 2 more dinners.
2 creamy steak soisé.
I don't want them.
Look, your restaurant should pay for everything. His suit, the food, everything.
That's right. It was your fault.
Yeah.
Oh.
So he had nothing to do with this.
Right.
That's right.
He was just sitting there and your waiter spilled it on him.
I'm sorry.
Now, the audience, I feel like, is not really on board with this sketch because what I feel should be a big laugh is David, he goes through one set of double doors. John Ennis has time to say one line, and David bursts out from the other side and says, and that meal is free. Like, I feel like that was supposed to be a big laugh of him just appearing through the other doors.
It's great timing.
Yeah.
It deserved a bigger laugh than it got. Yeah, I think people just aren't on board with like, it's like a whiny waiter sketch too, which it's like not, but it's not broad enough. A steak soisé also is like it's a rich soup on top of a steak, I guess.
I assume they made it up, but I guess it's true.
When I searched for it, well, first it was like, oh, do you mean Patrick Swayze's favorite steak?
Oh, weird.
but then it said it's another name for like cream of steak or whatever, or just like a big creamy soup on top of a steak. But I mean, I love when if we're really going to tear it apart, or as how it works. The repetition of this is our policy, like I see the comedy there. I'm just like, This is our policy, like which is what a manager tells you at a stupid place of like, I'm sorry, it's our policy of like, no, wait, you don't like this is not legal. Like just because it's a store policy doesn't mean shit.
And there's very simple, basic humor in John Ennis trying to argue against it, and David saying, no, say no more. We'll take care of this.
Yes, yeah. Though my biggest laugh. comes after this bit here.
Yeah, so David heads over to Charlie the waiter, asks him, like, what do you think you're doing bringing creamy steak soise to people who just came in here to sit? And Charlie meekly says, he ordered it. And David just spins around on his heels and say, oh, he ordered it. The wheel turns ever slowly. So he's clearly trying to throw this customer under the bus by saying because he ordered it, it's his fault. It was spilled on him.
I like that it's victim blaming of like, well, you did order the food, so the food wouldn't exist if you didn't order it. Like it's fun also as the opposite of what people's interactions with management is of just like, I want more free things. Instead, they're saying like, no, we won't give you anything for free. But yeah, my biggest joke is the reveal of the biggest laugh was the reveal of the owner.
Yeah, because John Ennis is like, I want to see the owner. And David says, you're looking at him. And then John's like, you? And he's like, oh, no. I was looking over there. And he moves to the side and the clumsy waiter is the owner.
And he says like, but you said it was your first day. Like, as a waiter. Yeah.
And then it's this really bizarre joke. He's been the owner since he was 13. And then David says, youngest restaurateur in the United States. And then the waiter's like, oh, there's this one kid in Arizona. So I guess he really wasn't the youngest restaurateur in the United States.
He has to, I like that he has to correct him. Like, well, there's this one kid in Arizona. And it just gets cut off. Like that again, it's fun. It's fun. But it's missing. I think it's very silly though that Odenkirk, this like sort of became a white whale for him, that he was like, he says it in his book. The reason for him wanting to even do a new season essentially of Mr. Show was to try and get this sketch right. It had been bugging him ever since.
And again, I think it's maybe slightly better, but it's still not like Mr. Show to me, you know?
No.
So Jerry Minor is about to call the police, and that's when John Ennis stops him. He walks over to David and Charlie, tells them, the suit is insured, and I'm not supposed to wear it out of the office.
This next string of, again, I said what my favorite sketch is, but if I have to name like why I think I agree with you, Bob, that this is the best episode for us to do, I don't think there is a better trio of sketches linked together in the whole series than these next
like
three.
Pally's, the Food Wars, and Story of Everest. It is like the 1, 2, 3 punch.
Yeah, this is when it really shows off what the interconnectedness of the sketches, why it works so much better than, or when it can work better than non-interconnected sketches.
So the John Ennis character is worrying about his premiums going through the roof and wants to know if there's any way they can handle it just between them. And he doesn't want to take his suit to the cleaners because it would involve a lot of messy paperwork. So Charlie, the waiter, is that the waiter, Charlie?
Yeah.
Okay.
And owner, yeah.
And owner, sorry, right. Owner's more important. He tells John, listen, I think I know a couple of guys who can handle this. And then we cut to basically a parody of the opening of Goodfellas, or like one of the opening scenes. It's this very filmic shot. All these guys are digging a hole in the woods at night. It's lit by the headlights of their car. One of them is told to get the suit, and the guy who does is like gagging as if it's a corpse.
Yes.
He throws the suit in the hole, and the pants in the hole, and they're all like gagging and throwing up like they're burying a body.
The pause on the spray of vomit has stuck with me ever since. It's never left my vision. And when I first saw this sketch, when I thought it was just a parody of Goodfellas, I was like, all right, I bet this is going to be funny, but I've seen a lot of, it's 90, by the time I saw it, it was like 99 or 2000. I'd seen Goodfellas parodies, so I thought it's got to do something more with it.
Yeah, and a lesser sketch show would be like, all right, it's Goodfellas, but they get rid of suits or something, but they bring it a step beyond. Let's hear Pally's, their parody of Goodfellas.
Ever since I was a kid, I wanted to dabble in the mafia. With people like Jimmy, the businessman at Diglio. Anthony, one-time Branca. He was called that because he said everything one time.
Jesus, this suit stinks. What?
And me, Tommy Wami O'Meara. We were a bunch of pallies.
Oh, thank you. This nice sauce, thanks.
Mio figlio. Ti piace? Piace? L'ho fatto per te.
Alla bruzza,
Fatto per te.
alla veloce.
Yep, loopy nerd. We buried. He's probably stinking up the whole parking forest by now.
Tutto il tempo. Paraloce.
Hey, watch your
Mother, father.
mouth.
Don't you tell me what to do, you little piece of shoe.
Hey, that's my
Aunt, you mother, father.
Wait, what? both of you can grab one of my books.
You mother father, Chinese dentist.
There you go. So the entire thing is not only a Goodfellas parody, which is not important, but it's a parody of bad looping and made in the TV versions of movies, which is not even a thing anymore.
No, yeah. I looked up the TV edits for Goodfellas to see if I could find a couple clips. Mostly it was replacing the word fucking with freaking. Anytime they'd say, yeah, you get your freaking shine box. That was the scene I saw from when Joe Pesci's character is being razzed by the guy that they murder and bury at the start of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, some of the greatest examples are it's been talked about to death, but the Big Lebowski, this is what happens when you find a stranger in the Alps instead of fuck a stranger in the ass.
That's a true classic, yeah.
And then sometimes they don't get the voices right. Like there's a very bad TV version of Mallrats in which they just hire some guy who sounds nothing like Jay to fill in for Jay.
It's incredible. Like, as far as it's a terrible version of that movie, but it's amazing to watch because, I believe it was that Jay was unavailable to do those lines as he was enjoying drugs, I think. And so they just have a guy doing impressions. So in the middle of every word, every other word Jay says is a swear. So when you have to dub that in with a guy who's not him, it's like every other word he's like, hey man, it's freaking like
just all over the place.
Yeah.
I remember watching like Ferris Bueller's Day Off on a TV edit, and I was surprised they couldn't say the word ass because it was like, Cameron can stick a piece of coal in his ass, so it would come out of diamond. It's like Cameron can stick a piece of coal in his fist.
Oh, yes, that's right. God, this feels old man to talk about because I mean, movies still get shown on TV and they are edited for television. But I mean, here's an anecdote. Like, I went on vacation a couple years ago and we stayed in a hotel and we're like, all right, I guess just put on the TV because we can't connect our computers to it. And USA is on and it's after 9 p.m. and they are showing unedited John Wick. Like, it is the full, I mean, there's commercials, but it's all the blood and all the swears.
I guess things can swear on cable now, so they're more willing to just like throw it on unedited.
Yeah, they don't care
disclaimers.
as much anymore now. But though, if you're gonna watch like any movie on like TNT at 5 o'clock, it'll still be edited and the swears will be taken out. But this thing about terrible, I mean, my biggest laugh every time is the thumbs up superimposed over the middle finger.
Yeah.
Like, I love it.
It's very bad. It also, Chinese dentist apparently was an inside joke in the writer's room because when it was 2:30, I think Brian Posehn would say Chinese dentist because this is not, I'm just quoting the joke here, people. When it 2:30, he tooth fixie.
Yes.
That's the Chinese dentist joke.
And it's them razzing each other with a bad joke in the office. And again, this is also the comedy that a bunch of white guys, if the entire writer's room, this is the in-jokes that happen. I mean, they're ashamed of it. When they repeat the inside joke on the commentary, they're like, do we have to?
that is a Find a Stranger in the Alps thing where it's just like, well, what do we do? What do we put in here? So Chinese dentist just feels like those words will fit in their mouths. It doesn't matter what they're saying.
I also love grab onto my books and they're saying mother father over and over again because that's also the start of the Everest scene.
Yeah.
And in case you don't know, the Goodfellas reference, the dabble in the mafia is I always wanted to be a gangster. And One Time Bronca is a parody of Jimmy Two Times, the character from the movie who said everything 2 times.
Get the papers.
The look on David's face when he refuses to repeat himself, like, that's another of my favorite scenes.
And his middle name is Wami, which is nothing. It's like Tommy Wami O'Malley.
You're right. It's a child's thing. God, and it's a parody of the scene in the movie where Scorsese's mom is playing Joe Pesci's mom and feeding all of them after they've murdered a guy and
Billy Batts, right?
They killed Billy Batts. Yeah. but
as soon as
thumbs up.
As soon as David draws the gun, it cuts to Jay Johnson immediately slumped over on the table. Bob's face is splattered in blood. And as he's questioning this, Paul F. Tompkins walks in with a gun, and we smash cut to a new scene with David dead in Bob's hands, and he's saying, why? And Paul F. Tompkins says, I'll tell you why. And then he's immediately interrupted with like a graphic, a promo graphic.
Yeah, that is also forgotten and I feel like it's not better now either. Movies aren't most movies are not timed for where commercials would be every 8 minutes. So they have to just cut in the middle of a scene that doesn't make any sense. And to do it in the middle of a guy explaining why he murdered one of the main characters in the movie.
He's interrupted by the logo and music for the Sunday Sunshine Moving Picture Show.
That's such a Mr. Show name for something. Like, God. And also, I believe Paul F. Tompkins, of the cast, he's the only one with any Italian American background. I believe on one of his parents is Italian.
I think he's Irish Italian.
Yeah.
So now we get the food ads sketch, which is great. So we hear gentle music. We see this old timey food cart with Gibbons Market produce painted on it. And we see the graphic appear with 1926 on the screen. And Jay Johnston buys an apple from Mr. Gibbons. He'll be back.
He's all packed going somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we hear David Cross saying, "My grandfather started selling good food to good people in 1926. And then we see the old man on the screen tell little Lenny, "Someday you'll take over for me." And then we cut to modern day David Cross as Len Gibbons in his market, telling the camera about how they sell high quality produce at lowest prices. And Gibbons is a funny name that comes up in Tim and Eric too.
Yes, Gibbons. Oh, Posehn plays him.
Yeah. And then Len Gibbons says, "We may not be as big and fancy as other stores, but what's so fancy about high prices?"
And his little smile, and that's what sets off his competition. I'll tell you what, I am such a nerd that when I first went to Los Angeles for E3 for the first time in my life in 2011, when I went to a Ralph's, I was like, I'm in Fairsley. I'm in the Fairsley.
Yeah, apparently this was about an ad campaign of Ralph's and Vaughn's kind of throwing blows at each other on local California TV.
I've never been to a Vaughn's, I don't think. I've been to a Ralph's a couple times. And yeah, when I saw the Ralph's logo, I was like, I felt teleported into the sketch, which, again, it's like, if you live in L.A., it's just the name of the local market.
They're boring grocery stores.
It's the Piggly Wiggly of L.A., pretty much.
So over a graphic of all the locations, we hear a female announcer saying, "Gibbons, the old-timey good place."
The old-timey good place.
Now with 15 convenient locations. So this is when the competition, Fairsley, fires back with their own commercial.
Sure, Gibbons Markets may save you a dime on select items, but this week at Fairsley Foods, all our produce is 25% off, and you'll never find a rat. Good prices, no rats. That's the Fairsley difference.
This week at Gibbons Markets, we're having our Harvest Time Red Tag Sale. All red tagged items are 40 cents off. Oh, and just to let you know, we've never had a rat here at Gibbons. I don't know what that was in reference to, but if you're looking for savings, look to Gibbons.
Gibbons, with 15 convenient locations.
So still 15 locations, a number that will be dropping.
Oh, man, this is such a great parody of what, like, this is online arguments, this is political ads, like, this is, Fairsley says their difference is that they can't say that this other place has rats. They just say, we don't have rats. And the mistake Gibbons makes is that he then says, we don't have rats either. Now he's on his back feet and he'll never recover. You can't even acknowledge that. That was the mistake he makes.
And it keeps happening because we see the next Fairsley's ad, which goes over all the items on sale, and then Bob Odenkirk says, "And unlike some places, you'll always find apples. That's the Fairsley difference. We've got apples."
Oh, they know it's going to work. They know, and now he's going to have to waste all his money to refute what they say. It's so good. God, the Fairsley and the pride at which they say it, like, that's the Fairsley difference when they're evil, and that the name of their store is Fairsley when they are very unfair. It's just so great.
So we go to the next Gibbons Market ad. Len Gibbons is in a barrel of apples up to his waist. He's wearing a shirt that says Apple City, USA, in front of a huge display of apples. And he starts off with, "We've got apples. Look, we've always had apples." How is that a difference?
It's not. And in the background, Johnston is a mime juggling apples too. Like, and yeah, he's wasting all his. all his ad is refuting them and spending money on giving away free apples. He's losing money here.
And the new deal for Gibbons is with any purchase you receive a free apple, just to prove they have apples.
And I think they mock this, not on this commentary, but on another one where they kind of make fun of how the audience goes like, oh, when a bad thing happens to characters. But I was that too. You do feel bad for Len Gibbons here.
Yeah, his life is being destroyed. He actually believed in his business.
By the big business. Big business is winning here.
And we see at the end of this Gibbons ad, there are now 9 locations instead of 15.
It's
and
sad.
This is when Fairsley brings out the big guns.
And at Fairsley, you can shop comfortably, knowing your children will not be abducted, then shipped off to a Pakistani whorehouse, where they'll spend the rest of their lives in homoerotic servitude. Come in with your kids, leave with your kids. That's the Fairsley difference.
I love children. I assure you, as a grandfather of 5, that no child has ever been taken from a Gibbons market. Ever. But to ease your mind, I've installed an extremely expensive, very expensive, state-of-the-art security system in all of our markets.
Hi, new policy today?
Each child is fitted with a tracking collar. It uses radio waves. Come to Gibbons Markets. Squash is on sale.
So he's being defeated by having to invest in all this surveillance equipment that wasn't necessary.
Now with free exclusive locations. God. I mean, Homer, also, this is couldn't be more real now, these fears and stoking these fears of child abduction.
This is pre-QAnon. Investigate the Gibbons basement.
I know this Gibbons would be just murdered by this next scene. Like, yeah, I mean, very like last weekend, I was seeing UFC fighters are mostly very stupid conservative people, and one of them won recently, and after her win, she goes like, "And we got to take care of our kids. There's a lot of bad stuff happening to kids out there, and we need to look into it." Like
hashtag save our children.
Yes, exactly. This is the same fears of like, come with your kids, leave with your kids. So this blames it on instead evil foreigners instead of sickos in America.
Homoerotic servitude.
And yeah, Gibbons, he has to like say like, I'm a grandfather of 5. And it's just so sad. This man is destroyed. His reputation is destroyed. Everybody thinks children get kidnapped in his stores.
So we get the next Fairsley ad, and it's Brian Posehn dressed as a baby as Glenn Libbins. And can you believe Brian Posehn did not want to do this?
It's so funny. A man in a diaper has to make a face and pull. Now he probably like wish he was this flexible.
Yeah.
Again. Like, but yeah, it's like, I'm Glenn Libbins. I want your money.
Yeah. And he's like sitting in an empty like Apple display too. I think they're going back to one of their old claims against Gibbons.
I know this is the kill shot, and I just love how it's framed. Like, some people will say anything to get your business, that's all they've done this entire time. It's just so evil.
Let's hear the Fairsley 3 golden promises.
Promise number 1, our stores are not constantly on fire. Promise number 2, employees are free of active sores and lesions. And promise number 3, homeless people do not defecate in our store aisles. That's the Fairsley difference. Fairsley Foods, now with 23 locations to serve you.
Hey! Here we are! Well, we're back to our roots. Driving the same streets my grandfather started on. Oh, but times were simpler back then, weren't they? Because people had integrity. People were honest with each other. Just like my grandfather was when he...
Lenny, you failed me.
But Grandpa, Fairsley Food lied.
Oh, shut up.
Hey, Mr. Gibbons. Hiya, Lenny.
So Gibbons is now selling produce out of a truck. Everything is marked down, and there's a sign that says, "Carrots, make me an offer."
He's having trouble getting rid of. It is the extra Mr. Show difference too that it ends with the past selves who exist in the commercial then learn the future, and he's punished for a thing that will happen in 70 years. His grandpa is let down by what will happen in the future, and then the kid knows what happened.
And Jay Johnston is returning from his trip to Everest.
Oh yeah, also the term active sores and lesions like
yeah.
that also is. To say that it's active, meaning like it's like currently dripping blood.
Weeping, yeah.
Weeping sore. and also too, this bit of it taking over the map, it reminded me as well of like, oh yeah, Blockbuster destroyed my local neighborhood business. I'd experienced this anyway, and it's always sad to see the bad guy win, but that it's an important thing to show. Kids gotta learn that at some point.
Absolutely. So now we're at the peak of Mr. Show here, the story of Everest. By the way, peak, that was not a pun intended, but
wow.
I'll live with it. So the story behind this sketch is very funny. So I recommend you watch the sketch because a lot of it is physical humor, but I think the clips will sell a lot of it as well. But the story behind the sketch is this all happened to Jay Johnston. So his cousin comes to his place drunk to tell a story about a Cubs game he just saw. He just was there in person. The entire family is sitting in stools as he's telling this story, and he goes back to sit on what he thinks is a stool, but it's really a Weber grill on wheels. So he tries to sit on it, it wheels backwards, and he knocks these two displays of figurines off the wall of Jay Johnston's house. And that is the beginning of the story. What happens next is he's getting into his story. Then the grandpa comes in and asks, like, what the hell happened in here? And as the cousin is miming what happened before, he falls again and knocks the things off the wall again. So this all happened to Jay Johnston in his youth. And he wanted to retell this on stage, but also instead of falling twice, which was the original sketch, he falls like 6 or 7 times.
It's the number of times. It is the repetition that makes this perfect. It's that it lasts so long. Like this is twice as long as the preceding sketches for it.
I've noticed when I was scanning through Mr. Show episodes to decide which one to do for this, there's always like 1 10-minute long sketch in every episode, it seems like.
But this one uses every minute of it for perfect. And I should say too, I love repetition jokes. It's different from some other people I know. I had friends who never wanted to rewatch the sketch when we were putting on Mr. Shows. They'd be like, I don't want to see this one. But like the first time I think I fell in love with repetition gags was in the Tiny Toons Con Ducky episode with mango juice. I just watched it the other night, and I'm laughing as hard as I did when I was 10. I was just like, God, he gets hit over and over again.
Well, Scott Aukerman pointed out, like, one thing they're doing that's slightly innovative is usually with a repetition gag, like, the time decreases in between each repetition, but sometimes there's a quick one and then there's a long one.
Yes, yeah. The last one is so long, like it after a real quick one, it's so good. And to know, like, Odenkirk was still defending it on Hot Ones of like, this is a great one, but it also shows you if somebody's cool or not with the show, if they can take this sketch.
And I think I've seen it like 20 times or more. And, you know, sitting down to watch it academically for this podcast, I thought, am I going to find this funny? And I was laughing out loud. I know where all the falls are coming too.
Yeah, I was still, when watching with my husband too, I was like, nope, still very funny. And that like, and he even said it, he wouldn't name Jay Johnson on the Hot Ones thing because it was recorded like 2 months ago or in the last month. But he did say, he still said John Cleese level. And this is, I mean, John Cleese now he's trouble. I don't want to hear nothing he has to say. But he is a comedy genius. But he's also a very tall guy who uses his limbs hilariously, and that's what Johnston's doing all over this too.
But when Johnston takes his big steps, I wrote down John Cleese in my notes.
It's the funny walk. It's the Ministry of Funny Walks for sure. Yeah. And John, when you see him in this, it does make you sad that Johnston, like, he does this so well that if he was a regular on Saturday Night Live, he would have been great in every sketch he was in.
Yeah.
He'd have been a perfect bit player of the group.
It makes me sad he didn't get more work, and it led him to a life of January 6ing.
Yeah, it's really sad. It's really sad.
But yes, Jay as Thomas comes home. Bob, playing his dad, gets to the point and says, "You did it! You climbed Mount Everest." So I like how that's all you need to establish a sketch. That's good sketch writing.
Yeah, just mother, father, I'm home. Oh, it's great. You climbed Everest. Yeah. Oh, you can learn so much about sketch writing here. Like, You don't need setup. You don't need, just announce the setup of it right then. Get straight to it.
I mean, Matt Besser, he was trained in UCB, which Bob does not like, all of that formal comedy training. But when I listened to his improv podcast, he said, don't do any setup. Your sketch should start with, well, here we are at blank, and then you just do the sketch. There's no like, let's get in the car first, let's drive there. It's like, no, you have to start with, here we are doing this.
Yeah, it's a rookie mistake in sketch writing to think you need all this build up and stuff, and you got to take your time. Like, no, people want you to sketch is meant to not be long. That's the point of it.
And they're building everything you need to know. So Thomas looks around and says nothing has changed except one thing. And Mom points out her thimble collection on the wall, and she says, I love it so.
Both parents are played perfectly too. Like, they're so funny.
Yeah, it's this really great old timey stagey acting too.
Oh yeah, it's like, oh, like as he's the first time he tells the story, they're like, oh, oh.
Yeah, they're on the couch. They're getting ready to, hear about this great adventure to the top of Everest. And, Thomas is shocking his parents by saying 2 men died, and they gasp in terror, and they hang on to every word like you're saying. And then he falls for the first time, but not the last.
On the final day, with the peak in sight, I suddenly felt my quick rope go slack. Oh. But before I was able to...
Oh, I am sorry. It was funny.
It was.
No matter. We'll help.
Yes.
Yeah, all in place and no harm done. Thomas!
Richard!
Oh, bless my soul, brother. You did it. Climbed Mount Everest. Tell Richard the story.
Yes. You should have seen me, Richard. Oh, I was on the North Face, ascending it, in the bitter cold.
No, not about Everest. About you slipping.
But I climbed Mount Everest.
Please, dear, it was funny.
Oh, I want to hear a funny story. Oh.
I love how Cross says that. I want to hear a funny story.
Yeah, the old-timey acting cracks me up. No, about you slipping.
Yeah, it was funny. This is another reason this works so great, that Jay's character Thomas wants to have so much respect. He did an amazing thing that he wants to tell the story of. And, this is a very identifiable thing that, like you make a first impression on somebody and you like spill your drink or whatever. And you're like, well, this person will never have respect for me again. Like that kind of feeling.
You become the drink spilling guy.
Yeah.
But Thomas, he starts up his story again by saying, I was standing over here as I was talking about my final ascent. So he's just kind of putting the details of the telling of the story to the side as he tries to actually tell the story.
And then he's like, man, I thought it was a stool. And every time the way his arms flail backwards, it's so good.
And it's a great mislead because he's like, I rested on it and I fell. And then he mimes it a little and like kind of chuckles at his own expense. And then for no reason, he falls backwards.
You're right. He could act out the sitting, but no, he just then spontaneously like, what? Falls backwards again.
And the reactions are great because Mom and Dad immediately stop laughing when this happens. And his brother just explodes. It's the first time he's seen it.
It's like, oh, that is funny. Once is funny, twice is just not being careful.
Yeah, that's what Mom is saying. And they all get up to help. Mom and Dad are very clearly weary over having to do this once again.
I like how they play their pain joints like as they get up there. It hurts them to get down on the floor and pick up all these thimbles.
And yes, they did film this live. And yes, they did have to reset every time for like 10 minutes to put all the thimbles back on the wall. And they said the audience was getting very bummed out while David was trying to entertain them.
I wish, they say it on the commentary, I wish they had filmed it and saved it. I want to see a funny story. I want to see all the way they had to entertain everybody too.
So we cut to another exterior shot, then we fade in once again. The thimble collection is good as new. And then that's when Thomas starts off where he left off before and talking about and miming how he was bracing himself against the heavy winds. And while he's like miming his like struggle against the winds, Mom and Dad can see what's about to happen. And they're like on the edge of their seat. But Thomas like reassures them like, no, it's okay. And then, of course, he falls once again.
Don't worry, Mother. The wind blew.
You did it twice!
3 times! You weren't here. He did it 3 times.
Please help me. Anyone could have done it. The drink cart was right there.
Yes, but no one would have leaned on it again.
Not when they were talking about how they had just knocked it over.
But I thought it was a stool to
How
sit
can
on.
you think that this was a stool? Idiots!
I am not an idiot. You asked to hear my story of conquering Everest, and so I told you. And in the course of things, I rested upon what I thought was a...
No! No one help him! Let Thomas do it himself this time. Climbed Mount Everest.
A real turning point is when Bob says, "No one help him."
Yes, I love it. He throws his wife onto the couch saying, "No!" God, his anger too. I'm just like, how could you think that God, he did it 3 times. His anger, like it's pure Bob anger too. Like, God, but the way he says, like, let Thomas do it himself, the way he's just searching around on the ground and also just the meanness of saying, like, idiot. God.
And it's great because we go to another exterior shot. We fade back in. Thomas is placing the last thimble on display, looking at his parents very apologetically. And then for no reason, once again, he falls backwards. And his parents don't even look up from what they're doing. His dad's reading a paper. His mom is knitting. They're just not paying attention anymore.
Funny. I am also laughing knowing that the audience who thinks like maybe it's over sees him instantly fall back as soon as the scene restarts and they know like it's not over. Oh no.
And so there's another exterior shot. We come back inside. Thomas is once again placing the last thimble on display, looking at his parents very apologetically as they're just looking on in like with anxiety, like they know what's going to happen. And then he falls backwards immediately. And at this point, Dad can only comfort Mom, like hold her in his arms because she's weeping.
I love Thomas reaches out and his father swats his hand away. Like,
yeah,
no,
he's
no.
like holding out thimbles with a shaky hand, and his dad swats his hand away.
Oh God, it's and yeah. So what they that was 6, and apparently they filmed the 7th. They didn't use.
I think the 7th one is the next one here that I'm going to play.
Okay,
so I think there are 7. So let's hear yet another fall.
And the wind blew as we approached the peak. Ah! And then I thought I saw a bear. Oh! We took our final giant steps. Ah! Snowblind! Could not see!
Thomas, wonderful news.
No, he almost finished his story without slipping.
Oh, enough of that. I've just returned from New York City, and they want to make a moving picture of your story.
Finally, the story of Everest will be told.
No, there were only 6.
Okay.
There were 7, they cut 1.
Got it. Yeah,
because I think the audience just stopped reacting.
It killed the audience. That's man. Look, insurrection, blah blah blah. Jay's acting here, like his physical acting of almost running into it, like the way he goes, and he puts both hands up in front as he inches next to it. You're like, oh my God, it's so good. Him almost hitting it is even better than him hitting it.
Yeah, he could have almost done it, but he was just, after doing it 6 times, he knew where it was on the wall.
Yeah, he's taunting the audience. The audience is the characters too, going like, please stop this repetition. Don't run into it. The way he covers his eyes, it's like snow blind with his big steps. God.
And then how they try to stop the brothers, like, no, he almost told the story without slipping. talking.
they're so mad at him. Like he's like, oh, enough of that. And I guess because this is 26, I like that too. It's not Hollywood that makes the movies in 26. It's New York. They haven't really moved to Hollywood yet.
I forgot
really
about
like
that. Yeah, it's still like before the pre-Hollywood era. So we fade into Thomas. He's in an old-timey movie theater. He's watching this silent film with great anticipation. He's standing in the doorway. I love that touch of like the person who made the movie or is connected to the movie. They can't actually sit with the audience. They're just like standing in the doorway and like tensing their hands up against the program.
Oh man, and this music by Evan Schletter, who did most of I think all the music for the show.
Yes. By the way, his name is Eben.
Eben, E-B-E-A-N.
I don't know what that comes from, but it's Eben.
Probably hippie parents or some shit. But no, it's sadly though, watching it now and hearing this type of music in this scene, it just makes me depressed that the Castro Theater is pretty much non-existent anymore. Like the last time I was there, they still had the organist there playing this type of music. That it's still. I hope Castro Theater can survive the bullshit happening now. But yeah, it's so fun, and they found a great theater. Like the exterior later is amazing.
Yeah, I love these old movie palaces. I'm going to one in Milwaukee when I go there soon.
They're all close here now.
Yes,
so,
no more fun here, but other places. So we see the silent movie. A very rotund man, which I think is at the expense of Jay Johnston's character, announces, "Mother, father, I'm home." By the way, it's a silent movie, so we're just seeing the captions on the screen. I think it's supposed to be like a Fatty Arbuckle style character.
Yeah. It's played by David Anthony Higgins, the large man who works with. Well, he's mostly known for Malcolm in the Middle, I think. That's his
and he's also in The Wrong Guy.
Yes,
the movie The Wrong Guy.
He's a heavier dude, and he's so great at being a bad silent film actor. He does such a good job.
But what inevitably happens is, like, Thomas is watching this with pride, not knowing, like, what the movie is. But the character is telling the story to his parents in front of the thimbles in this movie on the wall. And, yes, he does fall backwards. And I will say, this Higgins guy, the pratfall was crappy. Like, the things don't really come off the walls enough. I feel like they should have done another take there.
That's what's great. I think it's great because he actually has to, like, pull down one of them to get it right, like, to make it fall. Like,
so even the pratfall was not, like, up to snuff when it comes to what it should have been.
Yeah, I figured they also did it, like, they kept in a bad one or used a bad one because it makes Jay's look even more impressive when you see, like, when Hollywood tries to make a good pratfall, they actually do it shitty.
You know, it's always bothered me, but I can see it being intentional now.
The way he grabs the second one off the wall to make it fall like that always felt, at least that part felt intentional to me too. But yeah, it's the way the music that plays over him crying as they rain down on his head is so great.
And we see the text, "What a boob."
Yes.
And then Thomas emerges from the theater. The marquee reads, "The story of Everest." Sorry, the story of Everest. A laugh riots.
I love, and every time I'm watching this, every time I see him, I go like, "Oh, that's Scott Aukerman. Oh, look at that. There's Scott Aukerman."
A young Scott Aukerman ready to mock young Thomas here. He's moping. He's thinking to himself, "I conquered Everest and no one takes me seriously. I'm portrayed as a bumbling fool." He looks up at the marquee. He trips backwards, lands in the street, and a car runs over both of his hands. And then when he looks up at his hands, they're flattened cartoon hands like we saw in the beginning of the show when he introduces Bob and David.
And he put on the white gloves so they'd be crushed, and he's just screaming the whole time. Oh, man. And then, God, the genius of the final title reveal.
Yes, the end, the story of Everest.
God, that is so perfect. Like, that is perfect Mr. Show comedy writing there. And, you know, let me tell you about something I father hate. It is that HBO Max, when I put on Mr. Show, as I did for one of my viewings of this, whoever programmed it thinks that the credits are the real credits, and they let them play. It instantly. You have 10 seconds to tell it to stop. It's terrible every time.
I hate that. Like, it turns watching things into a game show. I've got to ring in.
And Mr. Show, I think there's maybe 2 episodes where they don't have a post credits thing. Everything else is over the credits and then like another sketch, pretty much.
And the credits, as they roll, it's just everyone laughing at this Jay Johnston character. But in, like, the last 10 seconds, he gets up to accost them.
Yeah, oh, yes, that's good. He's an angry man, this Jay Johnston.
And character in real life. So we get a fun post-credits scene that I don't think they like very much on the commentary.
And another thing, man. What's with this falling down shit? How many motherfucking times this motherfucker gonna fall down? That shit ain't funny.
Man, you saw the script.
Motherfucker, don't interrupt me. I'll interrupt my foot up your ass, punk. You know what? Fuck this. You motherfuckers are fired. All y'all motherfuckers are fired.
Jeez, how can you do that?
Toto!
Hey, man. Get this dog away from me, man. Get this dog away from me. Get this dog away from me.
Toto! Oh, sweetie pie! Oh. So all along, Sweetie Pie, the jailed gangster, was really Sweetie Pie, our kitty cat.
You naughty kitty cat. Oh, we can't stay mad at you.
We're gonna spank you with our lips. Take that. And that. And that.
That's a spanking.
So it's a very Wizard of Oz ending. And I think someone in the commentary is just like, oh, like the Wizard of Oz. And they're just like, yeah.
They did make fun of it for being very broad. Ackerman actually says, like, Cross, you were pitching Wizard of Oz all the time. He's like, are you gay now? What's the deal? The spanking with the lips, that makes it funnier. But there's also a lot of Mr. Show episodes end with basically a movie parody, like a 2001, or even just an Our Gang end of like, we ate too much pie, that kind of ending.
I guess they felt the need to address the cold open, just like, well, what do we do with this character? They thought of the stupidest thing ever.
Yeah, it's a good, he was on Coming In Via Satellite, and Via Satellite is like the giant head from the Wizard of Oz, so it connects and stuff. It's not their best ending, but I also did like that. To bring back Sweetie Pie, he would be the guy who's like, how many motherfucking times is this motherfucker going to fall down? That shit ain't funny.
That's what the audience was thinking.
Yes, yeah. They were addressing that, like, yeah, you might think we made him fall down too many times too, but we're unapologetic about it. We did it. And you can't unwatch it. As Bill Odenkirk would write in, he went from Mr. Show to this. He didn't write that sketch.
He went from Mr. Show to Tenacious D.
Right, yes.
To Futurama.
Yeah, it's...
I've never even seen Tenacious D. I know it's what Bob Odenkirk did next.
It'd be weird for you to watch it now because it's like you've seen them do better versions of it. I think it was really special at the time. And I like in Odenkirk's book, he talks about how, like, Jack Black's management was happy that it got canceled because it freed him up to be a superstar and not do a bunch of weird stuff that nobody watches.
He could go on to be Shallow Hal.
He is a megastar. I like that he has still not lost his sense of silliness. Like he's an extremely rich, extremely famous guy, but he wants to have fun playing Bowser when he does TV talk show appearances.
I really think that if he got famous 10 years later, he would have been Chris Prattified. Like, we're going to get you on a diet. We're going to get you on some growth hormones. We're going to make you into, let's say, some kind of Batman-style character. We'll figure it out.
Him at his thinnest is still like, that's my weight loss goals of like, oh, Jack Black as he appeared in King Kong, of like a man with a slight tummy. And I just like that now, unlike other comedians, he's like, you know what? I'm just going to be kind of fat for the rest of my life, and I'm going to enjoy it. That's me, man. And he still does stuff with Kyle Gass all these years later. Yeah. No, the second you see him in Mr. Show, even then you're like, you got the goods, you would say when you point.
He's
in the Superstar sketch.
Season 1 of Mr. Show, Jack Black, in a few very limited roles.
Yeah, him in the joke, the musical, the farmer's daughter joke musical. He steals the show. He's like, oh yeah, this is a dynamo who thankfully did not have all of the problems that Chris Farley had, and has remained successful.
But yes, Mr. Show, very good, if you couldn't tell by us laughing stupidly at all the clips. And The Story of Everest, one of the best comedy sketches ever written and performed. It's so good, and I still laugh at it every time. Even though I know what's going to happen and it's about repetition, it's just so good. It's so perfectly constructed and performed.
Yep, yeah, every bit about it. And the Food Wars sketch, also one of my all-time favorites, like making fun of commercials, American commercials, that fighting commercials that also are about how a smaller company gets destroyed by the bigger company. And yes, it's dated, but also the rapist coming sketch is funny. I still think it's funny. And Pally's, I can't think of a better. There's a lot of good fellas sketches out there, but I think it might be the best parody as well.
And I will say, if you want to watch more Mr. Show, it's very available. We told you up front where to find it. If you've never seen the show before, I would probably start with seasons 3 and 4 and then go back to 1 and 2, because there's still great sketches in 1 and 2, but they're not as polished and well done as the ones we've talked about today. So I feel like watch 3 and 4, that's 20 episodes, and if you want to see more, there's 10 that are a little rougher.
And, if you have seen all of Mr. Show and still haven't seen the Comedy Bang Bang TV show, currently the entire series is free with ads on YouTube, Plex, Tubi, places like that. It's definitely worth checking out. There's tons of great sketches in it.
Thanks again for listening to What a Cartoon. This is brought to you by the Talking Simpsons Network. If you want to support our show and get all these episodes 1 week at a time and ad-free, please go to patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. Sign up for $5 a month. You can get just that, but also access to everything behind the $5 paywall. That includes over 150 miniseries episodes to date, as well as access to monthly new episodes of both Talking Futurama and Talk King of the Hill. And the second you sign up, you get access to all of the $5 rewards we put online for the past nearly 6 years of the Patreon. That's a lot of podcasts that you haven't heard if you are fans of us. So that's all happening at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. And there is a $10 level as well. When you sign up for that, you can access all of the $5 stuff naturally, but also one extremely long podcast once a month, only for patrons of that level or higher. And what is that, Henry?
You're talking about the What a Cartoon movie podcast, which listeners of this in the free feed, they got to hear a preview of last month's new one in their free feed as well. That was us talking about Chicken Run, the 2000 Aardman classic. And this month, keeping our live action tradition going, just like last year when we did Who Framed Roger Rabbit, we're covering another classic of the 80s, Little Shop of Horrors, one of me and Bob's favorite puppety musical films. We truly love it. And if you love all of this talk about 90s comedy as well, I bet you would love hearing our ones about South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut from What a Cartoon Movie. And before that, we did Dumbo and Batman, Superman, World's Finest. Over 50 What a Cartoon movies at your fingertips. In addition to all the $5 things Bob just mentioned, we've covered everything from Akira to A Goofy Movie. Check it all out for yourself. One more time, patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons.
And I've been one of your hosts, Bob Mackey. You can find me on Twitter as Bob Servo, and my other podcast, by the way, is Retronauts. It's a classic gaming podcast all about old video games. You can find that wherever you find podcasts, or go to patreon.com/Retronauts. Sign up there for 2 full-length bonus episodes every month. Henry, how about you?
Follow me on Twitter at HENEREYG. I'm always tweeting up a storm, sometimes even about comedy history like Mr. Show. And if you're following both of us on Twitter, please follow the official Twitter account of the Talking Simpsons Network, which is at Talk Simpsons Pod, at Talk Simpsons Pod. We'll keep you up to date on new episodes of Talking Simpsons, What a Cartoon Movie, all our miniseries whenever we're doing live shows, all of that stuff. At Talk Simpsons Pod. It's also at Talk Simpsons Pod on Instagram if that's where you prefer to do your social media thing. And finally, if you want an easy to follow list of all the free episodes we've ever released, head on over to TalkingSimpsonsPodcast.com.
Thanks so much for listening, folks. We'll see you again next time for our extended free preview of our What a Cartoon Movie episode all about Little Shop of Horrors, and we'll see you then.
But Larry carries on.
Hello, insurance is my game, Larry is my name. Raping was another game of mine. Have you considered... Hello?
O'Reilly! Check engine light on? Take the guesswork out of your check engine light with O'Reilly Veriscan. It's free and provides a report with solutions based on over 650 million vehicle scans verified by ASE-certified master technicians. And if you need help, we can recommend a shop for you. Ask for O'Reilly Veriscan today.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.